Welcome back, everyone, to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Collings, and joining me here today, a returning guest of the show, it's Suit Williams of VoicesOfWrestling.com. Suit is one of the most prolific members of VoicesOfWrestling.com. He's probably, I wonder what the byline count, like if we have like a leaderboard for like most bylines on VOW, at least in the written portion this year. I feel like Suit, you're right up there. Maybe Sean Sedor is a rival for that title. Andrew Sinclair writes a lot too, I think. But Suit's one of the most prolific writers on the site, and I also want to shout out Suit does really good work reviewing WWE shows. He's the best WWE reviewer in the business, as far as I'm concerned. And the reason he is like that is because he is one of the only people in all of wrestling media that I think approaches WWE with like the correct sense of like uh incredulousness and disdain, but not outright cynicism, which makes him different than the way I would have to cover WWE, which would be just I cannot tolerate anything about that product for the most part. But Suit, I think you do a great job balancing that, balancing like a dislike of the product with fairness, which I don't know if I could really be if I was writing reviews for every show.
Yeah, I think doing the WWE reviews is partly why I'm so prolific on the site because the only other person who hops on them every now and again is Sean Sedor. Like, if I don't do it, it's not getting done. So I do those previews and the reviews, and yeah, man, I try to look at it from my perspective, which is a fan that got run off in 2017, hearing the product is hot, hearing that everything's like different and changing, and just giving my perspective on it. Is it all bad? No. The Hell in a Cell match with Punk and Drew was really good, but is it all great? Like some people would, try and work it out to be? No. It's largely a lot of like boring stuff. The problem is though, I'm hearing there's a lot of good stuff on the TV is what I'm hearing, but I don't review the TV. I don't watch the TV. Like, so the
Oh,
problem is I'm not gonna get to see Gunther versus Sami Zayn because I don't watch the TV. I don't get to see the ladder matches because they're not on TV. I'm watching the premium live events that Nia Jax is on every month. And so it's like, oh, all right.
well, I think I think the big thing is that like WWE reviews, there's no shortage of people out there reviewing WWE product, but it seems like almost all of it is like this relentless positivity. We love everything WWE does, and it's coming from a different. You have your WWE fanboys, but you also have the people that just don't know how to critique anything,
Mm.
um, and are just kind of relentlessly positive about the product. And then there's also people like Dave who like will point out like weaknesses in the product, but still like doesn't really show his full teeth because the business is doing so well and all that stuff. And I really do feel like you're one of the only people that's doing like really important work in terms of being honest about the product and being willing to call stuff bad while also being willing to call stuff good. Because I think there's also like the circle that I'm in, and I think like Rich and Joe would fall into this too, which is like I don't know if I can be fair reviewing the product because I have so much disdain for even the small parts of the company. Like I watched the Bad Blood Hell in a Cell match, and I will agree that the match was really good. It was the best WWE match I have seen this year. Um, probably the best WWE match I've seen in a couple of years, if I'm being honest. But I still watch it. I'm like, oh, I hate the commentary. Oh my god, I hate the camera angles and how the way this is shot.
Yes.
Like, I just have so much disdain for the product overall that it's even stuff that is admittedly like high quality, like a high quality match. I still have a hard time embracing.
And for me, I wrote about that in the review of the Cell match where I'm like, yeah, I like this, but I didn't love it, and I'm trying to figure out why. Like, is it just the presentation this company has? Like, I'm never going to enjoy the presentation of it, so it's just going to put like a hard ceiling on there for me. Is it just is it that stuff that's kind of like keeping me from going over the top on certain things? Because there are matches from WWE that I really, really like. They're kind of few and far between, but there was the Backlash 2023 show. There was the three-way intercontinental title match from WrestleMania in LA with Gunther and McIntyre and Sheamus that I thought was great. There was the Cell match. Man, I'm running out already.
Yeah.
Those shows were like a
Rhea
great.
Ripley versus Charlotte.
Yeah, I like that match too. So
Yeah.
there are great matches, but there is always just this cap of like this artificial just sheen over everything that'll just keep me from getting something like over the top in that company.
Mhm.
But I come at things fair. I give you my opinion on things. Like there's a Wrestle Dream preview coming up soon for VOW. Um and I give that show my honest thoughts. There's the MXM acclaim stuff that I hate. And then there's the John Moxley, Brian Danielson stuff, which I can talk about for an hour. Like, I try my best to be a fair analyst in whatever I'm talking about.
I also want to shout out, the Bad Blood review. At the beginning, you talk about Triple H's post-show comments when he was asked about the lack of black male singles wrestlers on these shows, and that's another thing where I feel like so many people review WWE content, but so many of those people just ignored what I think is like easily the most newsworthy thing coming out of that show, and something that had been talked about, leading up to it, some stuff going on social media, people pointing out the real lack of, singles matches that black men are getting on this roster and all that kind of stuff like that. So I feel like you did a really good job addressing that. Just as part of your review, because I do think that's like a super important conversation, and so many people just wanted to ignore it, or even worse, like be dismissive of his comments and what they, what the message from that was, which I thought was, the message I thought was horrible racism, but I thought you did a great job with that too.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of people who are covering WWE, it's like their comfort promotion, so they don't really want to get into like the nasty stuff. They don't want to get bogged down with like the lawsuits and and the conversation. Oh, sorry. I got the Yankees Royals game on. Thought there was a tying home run there. But yeah, there's
Don't get my
just
hopes up, Sue. Don't get my
I'm
hopes up.
so,
I am this week. I am a huge Royals fan.
God, caught it on the track too. That was tough. That was tough. But to get back into this more serious conversation, um,
Long drive by Castellanos. Yeah, I know.
exactly.
Literally that.
um, but yeah, a lot of people don't want to get into the serious stuff when it comes to WWE. They kind of just want to yeet. They kind of just want to, they just want to acknowledge their tribal chief, and you know, they're a little, I don't want to say afraid, but they're not really equipped to like have the conversations. And I just felt like from my perspective I could talk about it. There was some research there that I'll credit the Trish and Sarah wrestling podcast for fully bringing up. I used some of their stats when it came to the stats on black men not being on the pay-per-view. And the reason I brought it up is because that was the question posed to Paul Levesque. It was the lack of black representation on the show in Atlanta when they had a bunch of rappers in the crowd. They had a Future song as the song for the show. They're kind of, they ran to Atlanta for a check. And yeah, like Lamar said, they were less acting like colleagues and more acting like colonizers. So I thought, it's worth the conversation. And I threw my thoughts in there on that. And, you know, it it sucks that there isn't a stronger base of people willing to have the conversations about WWE, either because they aren't equipped to or because they can't stand the product. So if I can fill that little gap there, then hey, I'll fill it.
There's a that's funny. Like people, they can't like I just said that. Like I can't stand the product. Um, there's a an ad going around Massachusetts right now, where the Secretary of State is to the U.S. The Massachusetts State Secretary, I should say, is about voter registration, and he's talking about like they're interviewing all these people like who like, oh, I can't vote because it takes too long at the voting poll, or I'm not sure where my voting location is, and there's just like one guy who's like just some bald guy with a goatee who's wearing a mechanic's outfit that says like Jimmy on it, and he just goes, I'm too angry to vote. It's like really ridiculous, but that's like basically like I can't talk about WWE because I'm too angry. I can't tolerate the product. And that's how I feel. But anyway, we're not here to talk about WWE. We're here to talk about AEW All Elite Wrestling, which has been on TV with us Suit for 5 years. Doesn't it seem like just yesterday that first Dynamite was hitting the waves?
Man, I remember where I was watching the first Dynamite. I was sitting in my room in my old house. I was on Discord with my friend Mel, and we were just talking about the show as it was going. It was a fun time, and these 5 years both feel like a blur and like 10 years. Like you could tell me 2022 was a decade.
I do. I feel like that. I honestly I feel like it's all because of the pandemic, right? It feels
Yeah.
like it just happened, but also very long ago. Um, it definitely feels like time has flown by. It feels like AEW just started like a year ago. It's amazing to think that we have like 5 years of double or nothings and 5 years of all outs or all ins. Um,
All out. All in's
yeah,
the new one.
yeah. Well, the new one that's also the old one.
Right.
Uh, but we have like a real track record now of the promotion, and we're gonna end up with our own little histories of these promotions. Like, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with this show. Is I've got a list of categories of best and worst over 5 years of AEW, kind of talking a little bit about in the scope of like AEW television, but also just with the promotion in general. And I shared the categories with Suit earlier this week, and he came up with his list. I have my awards, so I figured this would be a good discussion to kind of review not just a year of AEW, but 5 years, the entire history kind of AEW, and kind of talk about some of the major things that worked and some of the major things that didn't work. And I had actually a lot of fun researching this because I think like for like I think the last category we'll talk about is AEW MVP, and I feel like that's something that we've kind of discussed back and forth, just in the spaces that we're in for a
Yeah.
number of years, since the company started. But there's also ones that I haven't really thought about, like what is the worst match in AEW history, and how do you quantify that? So I think there'll be an interesting point of discussion. Um, let's start. Let's start with this. Let's start with let's start with the best match. Now, this is not exclusive to TV, but just any match in AEW history. What do you think is the best match in AEW history?
Jesus, talk about picking a needle out of a needle stack. This is like as far as Matt, let me answer your question with a question. Do you think 5 years in that AEW is the best, has the biggest catalog of great matches in American pro wrestling history? And let's say, for argument's sake, that like WCW and Jim Crockett Promotions are separate. So we'll count those as like separate entities. Would you say AEW 5 years in has the biggest catalog of great matches in American wrestling history?
I mean, I've seen it all, which makes me a little bit more exposed to that than I can't tell you I've seen like every Jim Crockett Promotions
Yeah,
match
yeah.
or
And
even like every Ring of Honor match I haven't seen. I've seen a lot of them, but I haven't seen all of it. But I would say yes. Like I would just say from the thing about AEW, even when it's not great, and even when we have our complaints about it, and even if there's a Dynamite that's subpar, there's still like between Dynamite and Collision and sometimes Rampage, there's still like 2 or 3, like, really, really good matches on TV every week, and that just didn't exist pre-AEW. It just didn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, Rich Kraich always says it. There is a match that will happen on a Dynamite that if it happened on Raw, we'd hear about it for 15 years. Like it is it's incredible, and I do think the fact that every that we've lived it in real time and everything's accessible and everything's been, kind of cataloged the way it has, it does help AEW in the perspective of like retrospectively looking back, people are going to think like, man, there's so much good stuff on AEW like television and on pay-per-view that it's really incredible, and it's just going to set like a super high bar for everything else. But to answer
Yeah,
your question, best match was super hard for me to pick. I went to cage match to try and narrow it down a little bit. There's the matches that I've seen live, which get like a personal bump from me because I was see in the building for them. It was really hard, but I narrowed it down to a match that actually happened in 2024. So could it be recency bias? I don't know, but I feel like it really embodied the spirit of AEW. It embodies what I think a lot of AEW fans, both current and lapsed, want out of the company. It is Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay from Forbidden Door. These are two wrestlers who, Swerve was in the WWE system, but he made himself a star outside of the WWE system. And then Will Ospreay, who's made himself a star fully outside of that system, coming together to have an unbelievable main event on pay-per-view in front of a rabid crowd, which was pretty cold for the rest of the show. I remember calling Forbidden Door this year. It was a Forbidden Door show in front of an AEW crowd, in that not everything was getting over, but once the AEW guys in the main event got together, they were red hot. And yeah, they just came together and they had the match that made Swerve Strickland like a top guy, that put him over the top, that put him in the category in my mind of the Osprey, well, not the Ospreys, the Omegas and the Moxleys and the Jerichos as far as made men in AEW. That's the match that did it. And yeah, I thought it was absolutely incredible. It's one of the easiest fives I've ever given. And that is what I believe for right now is the best match in AEW history, which is very odd because it's not my match of the year for the year. But the other one is the Sting retirement match. So there is a different kind of math there. And I was live for that one. So the math is a little bit odd. But in my mind, when I think the best match in the company's history, I think Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay.
yeah. I mean, there really isn't. I mean, you could have said a wrong answer. I'm not going to say there isn't a wrong answer, but there are many, many, many right answers to this question,
Yes.
I think. Um, so it's hard for me to say, like, there's so many options. Um, I didn't, you know what? It's interesting you said there's like a recency. You think it was a recency bias. Maybe that could be playing into role, but I actually think it's more impressive for something recently to kind of be for you to kind of say a recent match, just because there hasn't really been like years and years of nostalgia or lore put back onto it
Right,
as like a
right.
legendary thing. It is really just one of a few matches that both Swerve and Will Ospreay have had respectively in AEW this year that you could have said. Like, if you told me it was a Swerve Strickland match that happened this year, I'd have like 3 or 4 guesses. And it's same thing for Will
Exactly.
Ospreay. Like, there's no shortage of options. But for me, I actually didn't. like think about this a ton just because I felt like I would have gone insane, kind of what you were talking about, just looking at like, oh man, but what about this match? What about this match? Because there's so many great matches and matches that are really distinctly different
Yeah.
um than each other. But for me, the match I chose was Hangman Page and Kenny Omega versus Matt and Nick Jackson um, from
Great pick.
AEW Revolution, the tag match from 2020. Um, just an amazing, just an amazing match. Probably my favorite tag match ever, regardless of any promotion. Um, there just the had everything I really like about AEW. Just incredible athleticism, timing, the heat. I mean, the spot where Kenny Omega goes for the one winged angel, but he can't get him up because his back hurts, and then Hangman like picks him up for his own version of the one winged angel to like pick up Kenny, and just the whole story
Mm,
of I love the builds to that where like Hangman is just clearly really pissed at Matt and Nick, and Matt and Nick are kind of antagonistic, especially Matt, um, about like why they don't understand why Hangman has this chip on his shoulder. Why does he feel like he needs to prove himself like this? Kenny's trying to hold it together. It's so good. Um, and I just don't think you can do a tag team wrestling match any better than what they did on that night. And again, there's so many good options. I mean, according to Cage Match, the highest rated match in AEW history is Bryan Danielson versus Will Ospreay from Dynasty. Um,
yes. I was there live. That's a great pick.
this year. Page and Omega versus the Young Bucks. That's third on Cage Match. I'm trying to find where Swerve and Osprey is.
I think it's in like the 20s.
Yeah, it's number 20. It's 10 if you go by Dave Meltzer's ratings, um
Well,
but
there's an
I mean,
Osprey buff there, so that's
yeah, extra
that's gonna
stuff.
help.
But even then, like, yeah, it's ranked 20th, and I'm like, well, that seems kind of low. And now I'm like, look at all these matches ahead of it. And I'm like, oh well, it's hard to say. Like,
Yeah.
um, I mean, there's so many. There's endless options. I mean, there's about a dozen Will Ospreay and Bryan Danielson matches. Just pick your opponent. Um, but to me,
There's I was gonna say there's half a dozen Young Bucks matches you could pick.
yeah, I mean, to me, like, and that's why to me, I was like, I'm gonna go crazy just looking at this, but like, gun to my head, like, instant thought, like, best match in AEW history. Um, there's one other match I'll mention. It's gonna come up later. Um, that I was like, all right, like, I need to. I want to consider this match too because but ultimately I don't think you can do it any better than Page and Kenny Omega versus Matt and Nick Jackson. Just a real high watermark for I think AEW pre-COVID because that was their last pay-per-view they did before the whole world shut down too. So there was also this kind of like that one to me like I said I think the fact that you chose a more recent match is really interesting because to me like that I've held that match up on a pedestal since basically 2020, so that was 4 years ago, more than 4 years ago.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
but there's so many great options. I mean, and it's funny, at least on Cage Match I'm looking at these. um a lot of these happened like in 2023 and a lot of these happened in 2024. So I don't really think like from an in-ring perspective, the company is still peaking as high as it ever has. There might be some other
Yeah.
things that people don't care as much about, but as far as like match that's just going to be awesome, there's some really high peaking stuff here.
And that's why I think the AEW, like, even though like every like business metric has dipped, but the pay-per-view hasn't, because people know, okay, the TV's kind of weird right now. I don't really want to go to the show, but I know when I pay $50 for a pay-per-view, I'm gonna have some great matches. More often than not, I'm going to have multiple great matches on this show, and I'm gonna plot my $50 down to
Mhm.
watch it. So
Yeah, I also think with pay-per-views, like what you're gonna get in terms of the card is announced, what wrestlers are gonna
right.
be on it, things that you don't know for the TV taping. And again, yeah, I agree that it's a guarantee of high quality. Um, that you're gonna get. I mean, another match I want to point out like is Cody versus Dustin Rhodes.
Yeah.
Um, there are matches that are a lot more athletic than this one. There are matches where a lot of stuff happens, but that match, to me, is just an incredibly important match for AEW. The first pay per view they ever did, Double or Nothing, before they had TV, before when they had a much thinner roster in terms of people that could draw. And there was no Bryan Danielson, there was no Swerve, there was no Will Ospreay. Um,
There was no Mox. Mox showed
nope.
up at the end.
Yeah, Mox shows up at the end. So like, and for them to go out there and they had that match with wrestlers that fans watching were all familiar with, right? Everyone watching was familiar with Cody. Everyone familiar watching was familiar with Dustin Rhodes. And they went out there and they had this incredibly personal, very bloody, violent match. And that was like a huge message about this promotion is different. This promotion is not like WWE. WWE, they never gave us this match for starters at all.
Well,
And
no, they
even if they,
did. They did
oh,
once. It was
they
a
did.
fa
It was
it was a
incredibly
fast
memorable,
lane.
clearly.
It was very weird and bad, and everybody thought, "Oh, they're gonna do a rematch," and it was like, no, they didn't.
Was Cody still Stardust at the time?
It was Stardust,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So there was that going on. But like so yeah, so WWE gave us a match, but it was so different than anything WWE would do at the time.
Right.
Um
It was like, I'm looking at the last 3 matches on this first Double or Nothing show. Cody versus Dustin, the first great match in the history of AEW,
mhm.
unless people were really into the best friends and then Helico and Jack Evans match, but I will feel safe calling Cody and Dustin the first great match in AEW history.
How this is a racer of the SCU versus Strong Hearts match.
If there's one thing Shima won't accept, it's erasure. After Cody Dustin, it's Young Bucks Lucha Brothers. The first one, not the ladder match, but just the first one. I still remember Mark Henry on Busted Open saying that that was the greatest tag match he had ever seen in his life. Young Bucks and Lucha Brothers. And then you had the main event of Jericho and Omega, and like having those three back to back to back like that was a real like mission statement of this is what you're gonna get from this company, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be great. And the people dug it.
And then went off the air with Moxley's debut beating up Kenny Omega,
Yes.
which is like probably one of my 5 favorite moments in the history of pro wrestling.
It is one of the best angles, I think, in pro wrestling history. I agree with you there, Jesse.
Like like
There
if
is an energy. I'm gonna talk. I'll save it for later. I'll save it for later because I
yeah,
got something connected to that. We'll
yeah,
save it for
because if
later.
yeah, it really is like it was such a powerful message of like, all right, people, like, we're gonna buy this pay per view of this company that's never produced a pay per view before. We really don't know what we're gonna get, even if we're familiar with a lot of the talent on the show. And then it went off the air, like with those 3 matches, and then that incredible angle with like the entire place just going insane. Uh, you know, iconic Alex Marvez commentary. Um,
They're still looking for who slipped him that Zanny bar before the show went on the air.
Honestly, I do actually. I was joking, but I actually do like Alex Alvarez's commentary in that specific moment because Chris Jericho was like saying that people got to say thank you to him for starting the company, and then like Moxley hits the ring, and JR is like, "Ooh, what's he doing here?" And Alex Marvez just deadpans goes, "I don't think he's here to say thank you." I actually do like that. Um,
Oh, Marvez.
yeah.
Still
Anyway,
stealing money.
hey, this is a podcast that appreciates Al Scoops. Okay. And he gave us that incredible Eric Bischoff story. So,
Yeah,
if you know what I'm
yeah.
talking about.
I actually don't remember. If you say it, I might remember, but I'll let you say
So,
it.
Eric Bischoff thought Alex Marvez wrote "Death of WCW" because he confused Alex
Mm.
Marvez with Brian Alvarez, and he like approached Alex Marvez backstage and was like, "Why'd you write that crappy book?" Because he thought it was Brian. He thought he was Brian Alvarez.
He thought Alex Marvez was Brian. That tracks for Eric Bischoff.
I know, despite the fact they look nothing alike.
And their names aren't well.
Well,
Marvez Alvarez.
there's one similarity
Eh,
between their names that
I guess.
I know. Um, I'm gonna pivot slightly, but our next thing I want to talk about was the best TV match because, of course, we have now 5 years of AEW television. The matches we've mostly talked about here have been pay-per-view matches, but there's also no shortage of great TV matches. What was your pick for best TV match?
I will safely say that AEW has had the best television wrestling in the history of American wrestling.
Oh, but there
Um,
was that. Don't forget about 1993 WCW.
yeah,
I know people
that
mention
was
that all the
one
time.
whole
Like,
year.
yeah, I know, but people will hold on to that.
Shawn
SmackDown Six
Michaels and
era,
John Cena went an
yeah.
hour in
I was
London.
gonna
It's
say
like, yeah,
SmackDown Six
okay.
era. There was that one
SmackDown
like
6.
Edge and Rey Mysterio tag match.
I watched all those when I was doing the Brock Lesnar retrospective. They were really good. But yeah, AEW, how's they took what if you took those 6 months and you just never stopped doing that?
Yeah,
That's
you kept.
basically every era people bring up to me is like, "Okay, how about you take that year and you just don't stop doing that?"
Well, and also like a major difference between AW and almost WCW. It's actually very similar to WCW, but in a more appreciative way. Is that AW literally like if the person is not in WWE, like they could appear on an AEW show and have like a banger match.
Yeah.
Like, there's really no limit to not only do you have an incredible roster of full-time signed talent, but you also just have access in different scenarios to all this incredible other talent around the world and other people that like there's really like limitless amount of great matches, and we've seen it happen a lot. My number one TV match, and it came very close to actually being my number one match, period, was Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson from Grand Slam. Um, Bryan Danielson's first match in the company. Uh, Effortless 30-minute draw, everything that you wanted out of the match. Still waiting for that rematch. It's got to
Well,
happen.
yeah.
It's got to happen. Um,
I wouldn't hold my breath. I think those ships are passing in the night.
hey, you know what, Suit? I held my breath on that Nigel McGuinness Brian Danielson match happening,
Oh,
and guess
hey,
who was
there
right?
you go.
Guess who
There
was
you
right
go.
in the end? Um, but just like an incredible breached expectations, super hot crowd, starting off that Grand Slam show, Arthur Ashe, there before the Wembley show, the biggest show the company had ever had. Just really, really incredible hot stuff that again, it's really symbolized like what Tony Khan had done, bringing these kind of talents together and giving them a platform for them to excel in a way, in the best way that they know how. So I give a massive amount of credit um, to everyone for kind of putting that match together. And I think, one of the best matches of the decade, one of the best matches in AEW history, period. Um, you can make a case that you know what? I think it might legitimately be my favorite Brian Danielson match of all time.
Man, that's a hefty statement.
I,
That's a
you know,
hefty
like
one.
it's not as good as like the Omega Okada matches. There's a few Omega matches that I can rate higher. I would say like Omega and Osprey 1 and 2. So I would rate a few Kenny matches higher than this one. But in terms of Brian Danielson, I mean, Danielson has so many great matches too. But I feel like if you were to ask me like, what's your favorite Brian Danielson match? It's like either this or the Nigel match. Not the Nigel match from the UK, not the most recent
Yeah,
Nigel
yeah.
match. But yeah.
The one where Nigel headbutts a lamppost.
I was so delighted when they did that spot again, when they teased that
Oh,
spot again.
it was calling out to him like the Green Goblin mask.
Yeah,
Do it,
I knew they were
coward.
gonna tease it. Like I just knowing both guys, like I knew 100% they're gonna tease it. But I was so happy when they did it.
Oh man. Well, man, if only there was someone who was cataloging the best TV matches in AEW
Yes, you
history,
were very
I could
overqualified for this
consult that
question.
list and see what people thought the best. Oh, hey, I write the Dynamite Dozen every year. The last one just dropped last week. Every October 2nd, I list the 12 best AEW TV matches of the year, including six honorable mentions, the honorable half dozen. This year, I will note that of the 18 matches that I write about, Brian Danielson was in 9 of them. He is also in the highest rated match of all time, which is the Kenny Omega match from Grand Slam. And to answer the question, that is also my favorite TV match in AEW history. I wrote a little note down next to like all of my all the categories that we're talking about today.
Hmm.
And my note for Danielson versus Omega was the peak of the promotion. This was right after Danielson came in. This was right after Punk came in. For what it's worth, it's right after Adam Cole came in. This is AEW when they are occasionally beating Monday Night Raw in the ratings, when they are nipping at the heels of the industry leader, when they are so much further ahead than they had any right to be, than anybody could reasonably expect for it to be. And it is just, I go back and I watch the video because they have the video of the start of Dynamite packed out, 20,000 people. Danielson makes his entrance, Omega makes his, bell rings, bell pop, and you hear Excalibur say, New York is AEW country. And it's just like, it's the feeling of this is the best promotion in the world right now. And this is just what so many people wanted pro wrestling to feel like. And they finally got it. They finally got it after years of just having to deal with what Vince gave us and having to wake up at 2 a.m. to watch New Japan shows, which I'll happily do. I still do that now. But from all that, you can just sit down on your couch, turn on TNT, and watch Brian Danielson and Kenny Omega go 30 minutes. It's incredible.
And I love the 30. I'm a huge fan of draws in general. Time limit draws. If I was a booker, I'd do a ton of them. And I
Settle
what I loved
down,
about
Rossi Ogawa.
what I loved about this match.
Marigold over here.
I resent any comparisons to Rossi Ogawa for many reasons. Um, but and what I liked about this was that not only was it a draw, but like it wasn't like one guy was about to win and time just ran out. Like you see most time limit draws get done, like where it's essentially like protecting somebody from having to do a job. Um, in a lot of
Saved
ways,
by the
this
Bell and
yeah,
not the TV show.
right. This was literally just like these guys are so great and like they wrestled for 30 minutes and solved like nothing. They didn't prove who was better. Nothing was solved or gained by just having this match. It was like these guys were just getting started and that was such an exciting match and sadly we have not had a follow-up to the match. Um but it was just such like it was exactly what you would expect between two all-time great wrestlers getting in the ring with one another and just going out there and just like being like we can do this effortlessly and what any other wrestler like so many other wrestlers could try to do this and they would fail miserably and we can have a 30-minute draw with like an incredibly inconclusive finish and it goes down in history as one of the greatest matches of all time.
Yeah, it's it speaks to how great these two are, and it just speaks to the quality that we got that night, and the
It's the
quality that
highest.
this company can reach.
Yep. As you said, it's the highest rated TV match in company history. Some other notable ones. I just want to shout out. There's the uh, FTR versus Jay White and Juice Robinson near 60-minute match that took place on Collision last
Yep,
year.
that was the 2 out of 3 falls match that was on the Owen Hart Cup final.
Hmm. There was a Kenny Omega versus Pac Iron Man match from
Yes,
2020.
that was 3 or 4 days. That was the Dynamite before Revolution 2020. That's one of the best weeks anybody's ever had.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. Who else? Who like I'm thinking of like the Kenny Omega week where he um, he wrestled the end of the G1 where he had the Naito and the
Yeah,
Goto matches back to back is
yeah.
like a rival of it. Another match that I love is from Rampage. It's Bryan Danielson versus Minoru Suzuki. Um,
That was actually not on that Rampage. If you remember, this was the night where SmackDown went on FS1 and they decided to bump into Rampage's time
oh
slot.
right, this was on
Th-
YouTube, right? Yeah,
this was on the buy-in. The this was the night the Bunny beat Roman Reigns. And
those were the
yeah, so
fucking days, man. Let me tell you.
they
Can we go back
stuck
to
an ex
those days?
I know. They stuck an hour on the front, called it the buy-in. I think they had, I think they did another match on that buy-in that was, like, the first match that, NXT beat AEW in the ratings. It was, I think it was Ty Mello versus Santana Garrett or something like that. So AEW ran that match on the buy-in and then ran Danielson Suzuki, which is insane.
There's the Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker match, who I think
Yes.
most people would probably say is the best women's match in company history. Feels like it happened a million years ago. And then I have to shout out the best match that I have seen in AEW history, live and in person. And I have seen far less great matches than you, Suit, because Suit, you've traveled for a decent amount of the pay per views. Um, but for me, it was Bryan Danielson versus Eddie Kingston, um, on an episode of Rampage. Took place in
Yes.
2021. It was like a Halloween themed episode. Um, that was an incredible match that I saw live. I also saw the incredible Joey Janela versus Kenny Omega lights out match live.
I
Um,
gotta say, I never watched that match. I never watched
oh,
either of the big Janela matches because he
well, it's on
wrestled both.
YouTube.
Yeah, because it's on
Um,
Dark.
it was the second ever episode of AEW Dark,
Mm,
and it was like a legit. I mean, I got a live bump. It was the first time I'd ever seen Kenny Omega live, so
yeah,
I probably generous rate, but I was like, this is it was like a 4.5 star match, and like
yeah,
they took like
yeah.
crazy bumps and stuff like that. It's actually an insane match in retrospect that just happened on AEW Dark.
Man, Dark became what it became, and it kind of helped the company out in a sense. But the original idea of Dark of just like, look, we don't have enough time for all the stars to be on the 1 2 hour show we have.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an extra hour up top where you'll get Kenny Omega and John Moxley and the Young Bucks. Like that was a
Yeah,
great idea.
I mean it was special. I'm glad to say I saw the greatest match in AEW Dark history.
Well,
Let's
hey, don't no disrespect, but I think Brandon Cutler versus Peter Avalon in the battle for their first win in the company. I legit went four stars
I was
on
gonna say
that.
that was you're not joking. That was a legit good match. I also wanted to shout out the Kenny Omega versus El Hijo del Vikingo match. Um, just because that was a match that I particularly had like high expectations for. Um, there was some internet points I was trying to win, obviously by like because people were mocking Tony Khan for saying it was a dream match, and I was like, well, if you know who El Hijo del Vikingo if you know who Vikingo is, then you know that that actually is a really highly anticipated match, and Vikingo went out there and just had an insanely good performance. Justified, everything I felt at the time. Uh, a match that I've gone back and watched several times on YouTube just because it's so satisfying to watch this guy hit these spots that people had never seen before, that we're watching. It's just that is one of my on the short list of favorite matches in AEW history.
This isn't very gentlemanly, but Omega and Vikingo went out there and teabagged everybody who crapped on the idea of this being a dream match. Like they just
And it
went
got
out
oh,
there and showed them.
first of all, it also popped the number.
Exactly.
It also popped the
Exactly.
number, so it's not just for the hardcore freaks. And like people who had never seen Vikingo before watched him in the ring. You could tell from the people live, and they're like, "Oh my god, this guy is insane." And Vikingo, can he be kind of sloppy? Can he be kind of formulaic? I don't really care for Vikingo slander because I'm a huge Vikingo fan, but I understand when people talk about him like that. Um, but when you talk about just some guy coming in, like there being kind of a bit of a reputation, there being some hype around him, we've never seen him before, and he goes out and does that. And obviously, Kenny was a great base for him and everything like that, but it was pretty insane, pretty insanely great match. I want to switch gears a bit. We've been too positive so far. So we got to go negative. The worst match in AEW history. Um, this is an interesting category because I don't think you would find a real consensus. Not like you would find a consensus for best match, but I think for worst match, there's a couple of different ways you can go about worst match. Um, Philosophically, you
Yeah.
could just go straight up in a vacuum worst match, like from a technical perspective. What went wrong? So a bunch of things went wrong, and it was just an absolutely terrible match. Or you could go like a match that had some hype and then just super under delivered. A match that was maybe on pay per view that went way too long. I think there's a couple different ways you can approach like the worst match in AEW history, as opposed to like the best match. It's really just like, oh, whatever match was the best. Not really match that not really like the match that exceeded expectations the most. Um, but I will I will say for me, the worst match for me was the Britt Baker versus Big Swole tooth and nail match. Um,
Oh
that
yeah.
opened up a pay per view cinematic match. Uh, Totally didn't work. They were just fighting in a dentist office. It was really bad. And they also got, if you remember, suit, they got like concern trolled into putting this on the pay per view because it was originally supposed to be on the buy in. But enough people online got mad that there was only one women's match on the whole pay per view, so they added this Britt Baker and Big Swole match, and it kicked off the pay per view, and it was awful. And there are probably like it also wasn't really a match because it was a cinematic match. It was more like a backstage segment in a lot of ways. So like you could pick like a match that flopped in a bigger spot, or a match that had more blown spots because there wasn't really that many spots to blow in this kind of interaction. But it was a nadir for AEW in a lot of ways. And I think it's a fitting choice for worst match.
Since we're getting negative, I will break the news that the Yankees are going to the championship series.
I'm very worried about this suit because I do not like Detroit or Cleveland's chances of knocking them off.
We
I'm
might get
very
a
concerned.
Subway World Series. Think about that,
I
Jesse.
will be rooting for the Mets extremely hard. The Mets don't bother me at all. I'm kind of amused by their tortured existence. As a Tottenham Hotspur fan, I think I sympathize with the Mets a lot as fan bases with expectations that are just constantly undermined by nonsense. Um, so me and Mets fans consciously chose not to be Yankees fans. So I personally have to respect that suit. Do you have a baseball team suit?
No, I was like, there was a point I spun a wheel once to like pick a baseball team, and it landed on the Astros, which was helpful because they had just won the World Series.
Mhm.
But then all that news broke, and I can't be
You
out here rooting for
spun
no
what?
cheaters.
Can you elaborate on this wheel? Was this a physical wheel you spun?
No, I went to a website for like spinning a wheel. I put in all the baseball teams,
You were just like,
all
I need a
30
baseball team.
teams.
I'm gonna spin this
Yeah.
wheel.
If it
Yeah.
landed on the Mariners, I'd have picked them. They just so happened to land on the reigning World Series champions. So it was like, all right.
Probably geographically closest to you.
Yeah, I get Ranger games though. I do get Ranger
So I was
games.
gonna ask, do you get like a local sports network that has all the games of a team?
Yeah, I get not Cox Sports Network. That's a decade ago. Bally Sports. So Bally
Oh yeah.
Sports South, and that will give me Texas Ranger games. I don't know why I didn't just watch the Rangers, but I
Yeah,
just
because
spun
you
the.
are in kind of in Louisiana, you are kind of in a random kind of dead spot for baseball.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny though because the Superdome, fun fact, it was originally built to be a baseball stadium, but
Like the
for
Astrodome,
whatever
yeah.
yeah, for whatever reason we didn't get a baseball team, so we just said, "Hey, we'll get a football team. We got this big stadium." And we got our Saints and we've been mostly regretting it ever since. But hey,
Anyway,
Spencer Rattler's starting. Hopefully I don't regret that by the time this episode comes out.
um, okay, well, this is unwelcome Yankee news, but I mean, because honestly,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
rooting for any team that's not the Yankees. That's just the way I roll.
That's that prime grade hating. I can
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, you're kind of born with it. Although my dad likes to pretend that I think it's part of it is to egg me on. But my dad talks about how he like, oh, I kind of like the Yankees. He'll say that like from time to time. Um, but no, this is yeah, you can't
Yeah.
like we celebrate Yankee Elimination Day, Yed, in this house. So I'll tell you. What
Yeah.
was your worst match?
Yeah, I broke the Yankee news to kind of delay talking about this. But
It's
yeah,
worse than
I
talking about a Yankees ALCS advancement.
Yeah, so my thought process when thinking about the worst match is what is the biggest like failure of thought process here? How did something get on paper, then get cleared, then see the screen, and nobody thought that's not a good idea? Certain honorable mentions for this would be Dustin Rhodes versus, and I apologize, but I forgot his name, so I only wrote Chairman. You
Sean
remember?
Spears.
That's it from one of I think it was the first pandemic pay-per-view.
Yes, this was a very poorly received match. I remember it now.
Yes, and it was straight like WWE comedy and Sean Spears had like underwear with Tully
Tully
Blanchard's
Blanchard's
face
face
on it.
on. Yeah,
How
that's the
like
layout. Like mostly what I remember from the match.
how does that make a pay-per-view? Things like a match like that. Another thing in that vein was Abaddon versus Julia Hart from World's End last year. Who thought Abaddon, the character you only break out in Halloween, who thought putting them on pay per view in December for 12 minutes against Julia Hart would be a good idea? That's just a failure of process. Um, So, with that in mind, the worst match in AEW history for me was from a Dynamite, I believe, in 2024. So, again, I'm going recent. It's Billy Gunn versus Jay White.
I have never seen this
Who
match.
well, let me tell you what happened here. Billy Gunn jumped Jay White at the bell. Jumped Jay White during his entrance, actually, and he beat him up. We go to commercial. We come back. Billy Gunn is continuing to beat up Jay White. He keeps beating up Jay White. And then the Guns run in to cause a DQ. Jay White, I think, landed two chops in this 10-minute match with Billy Gunn on Dynamite.
Yes,
This
Billy Gunn was booked like 1984 Hulk Hogan in this match for some reason.
it confounds the mind. And Jay White did get his win back. He pinned Billy Gunn on pay per view in the trios blow off to the Bang Bang Scissor Gang stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't be having Jay White selling for Billy Gunn really at all, let alone for 10 minutes consecutively. Like if Jay White's like foot was broken and he was in a walking boot like Jacob Fatu, even then, I'm like, ugh, still, do you want that visual?
It's awful. The company's weirdly been protective of the way they book Billy Gunn for some unknown reason. Um,
Well, the
I'm
company
not.
respects their veterans. Like, they respect the veterans of the company, but the problem is Billy Gunn is not Sting. Billy Gunn is not, Taz to an extent. Like
Well, like they would. I don't think they would use
Billy
they
Gunn,
to use Dustin as an example. Like I don't think they would put Dustin in the
Dustin, yeah.
spot. Like they would just have Jay White beat him. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not like anti-acclaimed. I know a lot of people are, but I am anti Billy Gunn. I think he needs to go like yesterday.
Remember that angle they were setting up where he would retire? What
Yeah,
happened
that was
there?
like because they wanted to win one more title before he retired, and they won a title like 2 years ago, and he's still just around, and it's very annoying.
Well, the problem was he had that belt for like a year. Like I thought when they were doing
They
that, it's like, all
damaged the
right.
trios titles. Like it's just the whole thing is a mess. It's a good choice though. I agree. I think a lot of people would say either Adam Cole versus Chris Jericho or Adam Cole versus MJF. And those matches were not good, but I kind of like that we went with like lesser important matches because those matches are really bad because they largely bombed in really big spots.
Yeah.
These matches are more like like just total all around incompetence.
Yeah, it's just a swinging at a pitch you shouldn't have swung at. That's swinging at a pitch in the dirt. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you
Uh,
gotta see
Kate,
it in.
yeah, Cage match has the Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara match as the worst match of all time. That was the match where Matt Hardy smacked his head off on the concrete after falling like 10 feet
Yeah,
and kept wrestling. Um, so
yeah, that's
that's a
reasonable.
I understand why that got such a low rating in AEW history. But uh, that's kind of like oh mistake really a really bad mistake happened in the match. Um, as opposed to like just like an overall just complete failure like some of the ones that we're talking about.
Yeah, that match was. I mean, that match was a bad idea because it was Matt Hardy in it, but it. We're kind of disqualifying it. We're talking about matches where like everybody got to the end of it and it was just really bad.
Mhm. So some of these other really bad matches. So I'm gonna read like the top bottom five here. We've got
Let's hear.
Dr. Britt Baker and Rebel versus Nyla Rose and Vicky Guerrero from
Yeah,
I don't remember that at all. It was on a show called
that
AEW Dynamite Fan Appreciation Night. I don't know what that was for.
that I think that was a dynamite heart of the pandemic. Women's division just they were empty in the cupboards. I remember they had one of the ring announcers. I think it
Well,
was
that was
Dasha.
during
She had to
that
work.
was the women's tag team tournament.
Yeah.
Can I
So
read you this card on Fan Appreciation Night
let's hear it. Let's
from
hear how the fans will appreciate it.
June 30th, 2021?
All right.
Daly's Place. First match was first match World Tag Team Eliminator title match. Eddie Kingston and Penta El Zero Miedo beat the Young Bucks to earn a
I
title shot.
do. I remember the title match. I don't know if I
Yes.
remember the eliminator,
Mhm. Then
but
we had
yeah.
a Jungle Boy beats Jack Evans.
All right.
No, okay.
Reasonable.
Yeah. Miro defeats Brian Pillman Jr. by referee stoppage in the TNT title match.
Sounds right. One of the about month and a half where Miro was locked in.
Uh, Britt Baker in Rebel beat Nyla Rose and Vicky Guerrero, as we mentioned. And then in the main event, MJF beat Sammy Guevara in a 20-minute match that Dave gave 4.5 stars to, and it has an 8.23 on Cage Match. So that match,
I remember this quality
yes,
match.
I actually think a long-term story in the company is that Sammy Guevara has never beaten MJF in a singles match. I feel like that
Yeah.
was trending towards a long-term story they were going to tell. Sammy's kind of fallen off a cliff since then.
Yeah.
But I do feel like that's something they have in their back pocket. Some
Have
other really
any
bad,
of the other have any of the pillars beaten MJF in a singles match? Because
probably not.
Darby hasn't.
Yeah, and I doubt Jack Perry has either. So
No.
probably not.
Yeah, MJF. I remember they had a really good opener. Double the first. It was that same Double or Nothing with
Yeah,
the Dustin and Sean Spears match.
you're
They had a
right.
really good opener.
Yeah. Other bottom ones, there's a Cesar Bononi versus a Luchasaurus match from AEW Dark. I actually do remember that match. Um,
I kind of disqualify dark matches. Most of them are like squashes at
there
this
was like a
point.
famous miscommunication with them running the ropes and stuff like that.
Hmm. It'll happen.
Then your Billy Gunn and Jay White match that you
There
mentioned.
you go.
A lot of these matches are not recent. Like we're going back in time here.
Yeah,
To a lot of these
yeah.
matches. And then Allie and Brandy Rhodes versus Mel and Penelope Ford. That is
Ooh,
from the women's tag team tournament.
remember Mel? Ooh, boy, the
That's
Nightmare Collective.
that match sounds cursed.
You want to talk dark days? People want to complain about Chris Statlander's booking now. Good lord, you you weren't there for Mel. Good God.
Yeah, that's rough. But to be fair, like and then we get to my choice, Big Swole versus Dr. Britt Baker.
There was a really I remember there being a dark match. It was Big Swole versus I think it was Diamante, and it was like some gimmick match that was really bad. I remember that because I was at a dark taping that I was at, but I left early, so I didn't see the match.
um, do you want to go back positive or do you want to keep it negative?
We could keep it negative for a little bit. We don't have too many negative
All right.
negative awards
How
to
about
give.
the worst? I just said angle storyline feud um, of AEW's history. So it could be, I kind of kept it loose in terms of saying it could be an angle, a storyline, or a feud. But do you have one that just sticks out as the absolute worst?
So just generally like the worst thing the company ever did.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna give my honorable mentions first. How about a little Britt Baker versus Big Swole? You know, to keep that theme going.
Mm-hmm.
You
Already
got
talked about it's nadir. Yeah.
you've got Sammy Guevara slash the Inner Circle versus the MMA guys, American Top
That
Team.
crossed my mind. That did cross my mind as it's like,
Yeah,
remember what Dan Lambert was on TV all the time?
remember Junior Dos Santos? Was he one of them? I
Yeah,
think
I
so.
believe Junior Dos Santos. See, I actually think some of the MMA guys were kind of cool wrestling, like when they did that kind of 5-on-5 kind of wild brawl on a pay per view.
Yeah, yeah, that
Um,
was the one I was thinking of.
yeah, I think it was
And
Henry
then
Cejudo was part of it.
yeah, there was the one guy with the raccoon eyes, or was that Mike Tyson's crew?
Oh, that
I
was
got
another
those
bad
mixed
angle.
up. I
Yeah.
got those mixed up. Yeah, and then you got to throw in the Elite versus AEW from this year. Just a whiff as far as a big heel stable going, which is really disappointing considering the guys involved. But my official pick for the worst thing in AEW history, it's the Brochachos. I'm sorry, I gotta do it.
See, I
The
felt
thing,
like no, go
yeah, the
ahead.
thing about it is, it wasn't my taste, and it wasn't a lot of people's tastes with the pre-tapes and all that stuff. But I was into the build for the turn because they were building up to the Wembley main event, and the stuff was hot in the buildings. And I every time like they would hit the corners and the other guy would be standing there, I would get this buzz of, all right, the turn's coming, but it never came, and they missed the peak because they were popping good quarter hours and people were into it, and so people were being like, no, you got to push it out, you got to push it out. Until they pushed it out, but the problem is they pushed it out too far. Adam Cole gets hurt, the peak gets missed, and everything falls apart. MJF goes off the rails. We get our Scooby Doo mysteries with the devil and the nonsense, and you get handicap matches on pay-per-views where MJF's doing his Triple H impression and just burying the tag division. You've got mass guys winning the ROH tag titles on a Dynamite. It I summed it up in my notes. It missed its peak, sent AEW into a massive identity crisis, cost the promotion the blind loyalty of the fans, and accomplished none of its goals. But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Yes, this is one where I feel like if we were to poll a bunch of people, this one would come out as the number one answer because not only was it bad, it also seems to have caused, depending on who you listen to, really long-term substantial damage to the company. And that it
MJF's
has
still
not
kind of recovering from it. Adam
right.
Cole physically has not recovered from it yet as we speak. It
It they're gonna like theoretically Adam Cole should be coming back and they should be feuding because
He
we they
jumped off a curb and his he's been in traction for a year. That was at Grand Slam last year.
yeah, I mean that's we don't I don't think we have all the details on that, but that's basically what we are led to believe. It seems like are they really gonna is he really like when he's healthy, is he really gonna come back and they're gonna do this feud?
They can't. They I think the thing at
Is it
Double or
better if we just
Nothing.
all forget about it? Because it was the most prominent thing in the promotion for a good several months, like you said, and there was
Well,
this honestly, I'm kinda glad like, it was also, like, it's just super obnoxious to be a fan of AEW and have to deal I talk about, like, the discourse a lot, like,
yeah.
just dealing with everyone's reactions to that week after week after week, just, like, really soured a lot of, like, of the fun of AEW is having to deal with the MJF and Adam Cole discourse in addition
and
to what we were
then
seeing on screen.
and then you had the CM Punk discourse on the other channel along with everything that he was doing at the time. It
Yeah.
was like and it all could have been fine if they just did the turn and built the Wembley main event and, you have Cole win it or whatever,
Yeah,
and
there I th
then
and I kinda think that they were originally supposed to do that, but they felt like it got hot, so they couldn't kill it at that
yeah,
time.
it really is just a matter of something missing the peak,
Mhm.
and then something went wrong because they missed the peak, and it was really a spiral that just spiraled out of control.
Well, there were problems too, even leading up to like what we described as the peak, with a lot of like really stupid vignettes.
Yes,
The
like, again, that stuff, I hated that too, but I tolerated
the
it.
jobbing out of some of these tag teams, like him beating Aussie Open by himself and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Well,
It
no, they
was
beat they were both together when they beat Aussie Open.
they beat he beat
That was just a
Dustin.
kangaroo kick. Yeah, the Righteous is who,
They s-
were
I mean they
unfortunately.
pinned Aussie Open with like that stupid double clothesline
Yeah.
move. Like
I
it
mean,
was
yeah, like, they just missed the peak. They both get hurt. There's a unit that comes together with the stated purpose of getting rid of MJF, and they accomplished it the night they revealed themselves. So it's like, "Oh, well, you're just here now."
what do we do now, guys? Um so you went big
Yeah.
with yours, which was this like really long-term destructive angle in the main event surrounding the world title, surrounding one of your biggest stars and someone else you wanted to be one of your biggest stars in Adam Cole. Um, I went small, and I'll say the Nightmare Collective. We already mentioned them earlier, but if you
Yeah.
just want to talk about like, there is a lot of nostalgia for early stage AEW, but we talked about you go back and look at some of those cards. It's like talent was really thin. Nothing was more evident about that in the women's division. Um, and this focus on wanting to make Brandy Rhodes a television character, even though she was really poorly suited for it. Um, can you name me the members of the Nightmare Collective off the top of your head?
I 100% can. There is the leader, Brandy Rhodes. You have Mel, the aforementioned. You have Dr. Luther, the Japanese deathmatch legend. And then you have Awesome Kong, who could not work, who like
Yes,
physically could not work.
right,
He
and
couldn't
it
do anything.
it maybe works if Awesome Kong is like prime Awesome Kong, and she's just like
Even
this
then,
big,
it's like,
and she's just like this big badass laying people out. But they brought in Mel, who's one of the 5 worst wrestlers the company's ever had.
yeah, I won't fight
Um,
those claims.
and Dr. Luther, like a pretty big nepo hire.
He got a Dynamite main event. If he got, because it was I think it was Jericho's like 30th anniversary, and it was
Yeah,
Jericho and
honestly,
somebody versus him and
he
Serpentico.
he he doesn't bother me because I don't know. He's just a guy that was around wrestling for a long time, never got a break in the United States, and he wants to get a crappy, job on a major promotion where he gets to appear on TV every once in a blue moon. That doesn't bother me. It would bother me if he was like a major figure, and for a brief moment in time, the Nightmare Collective was this major angle, and then they mercifully killed it with really no explanation. Um, so ultimately, like the negative value of the Nightmare Collective was pretty minimal. It was pretty contained to only like a few real episodes of Dynamite, because they kind of quickly recognized that it wasn't working and got rid of it. But I think it still stands out as the absolute nadir of AEW's creative historically.
Yeah, it was a bad idea from, it's the same as Billy Gunn versus Jay White. It's a bad idea on paper that was a bad idea in execution. And I think Brandy had value as Cody's second. I don't say that to be like, you know, to just
But
stick up,
only
to be lazy, but
but only
that
if Cody turned heel, which he never wanted to do.
I do think there was like I do think she helped in kind of like a Miss Elizabeth style, just, rooting for him in the corner kind of deal. But like her instincts for wrestling otherwise are really bad. They're really bad. And sometimes you got to take the pencil away.
Yeah, AEW when it first started did not need a Stephanie McMahon character.
Yeah. I still remember. I'll say one good thing Brandy did though. The whipping angle with Cody and
Oh
MJF.
yeah,
This is where they killed off the Nightmare Collective, by the way. This angle where Brandy, like Cody's like 8 shots in, and he's on the mat and he's dying, and Brandy just comes out and he's like, "You got this, baby. You got this." And Cody fires up like Cody does. God, Cody was so great. I
it's
miss
such a
him.
good angle.
I
It's
miss him. I miss Cody so much. The pandemic is what ruined Cody.
yeah, it
But
was that
man,
well, worst feud you could legitimately say Anthony Ogogo and Cody.
I saw that match live. It wasn't good.
Well, and that really did damage to Cody.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
not include a worst promo um category just because I didn't really feel like going through like worst promos in AEW history, but
Yeah.
that one definitely stands out. Um,
That 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 weigh-in angle. I think I was at that Dynamite with the weigh-in angle with the pyro from the minor league baseball game going off next door. Oh, I remember that. That memory just unlocked in my
so is that
head.
New Orleans?
No, that I went to Jacksonville for that
Oh,
Double or
okay, yeah,
Nothing. That
because
was
I was
my
gonna say,
first. That was
was
my
that the
first
first?
post-COVID trip.
Yeah, that was the first like full crowd they had.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that was. I think I could rip that card off the top of my head.
Well,
Do
how
you want
about
me to? Like,
no? It's okay.
no. Yeah, yeah.
Do you want it?
Like
You know what?
you
Stu,
were
why don't you do it?
pausing like you were expecting me to. I
Well,
was just
I
like,
thought you were going to start. listed matches, like, but
Yeah.
this isn't a Tony Khan press conference. You don't have to list every
Yes.
match that ever. How about the best angle slash storyline in feud? Because I feel like this one is a really good one because I don't think there's an obvious answer. And there's a lot of really high quality ones.
God, so much of that early Cody stuff I thought of him versus Jericho, where every Dynamite had just a big elite versus inner circle brawl. I remember Cody because this was in MJF was like babyface leaning.
Mhm.
He was Cody's second, kinda. Went up to the inner circle's like press box, and there was like a glass door there. So Cody sticks his fist out. MJF wraps his wrist in the scarf, and Cody punches through the door. Like, oh my god!
Well, Jericho is doing like the smug, like, haha, I'm in my private box. You can't get me. And Cody's like, we'll just go up there and beat your ass.
Oh, there's
Well, it
no
also
invisible
subverted the
wall. We can just
WWE. It
go.
subverted the WWE trope of like, oh, the heel's like in a box and he can say whatever he wants, and the babyface can't get him for some stupid reason. And then like that was like what Jericho was thinking. And then Cody's like, this isn't WWE. I'm just gonna go up there and kick your ass. And he did.
God, when Cody comes back in 3 years, it's gonna be or whenever his contract ends. That's
I don't know if
I'm
he's ever
I
coming
will.
back.
He'll listen. Look,
He
he's on
needs to
top right
start.
now. I know, but
He needs to
you
start
know
getting stale in WWE.
he's gonna slip into like a Randy Orton respected veteran role, and he'll look over and see the money on the table in an AEW return, and you know, I'm not counting it out. That's what I'll say. I'm not counting it out. But that's not my answer, by the way. I just wanted to. We were talking about Cody in
Yeah,
the
it's worth
start of the
mentioning.
AEW, and I was just like, I was fired up. Um, my answer is, and I included like all the principles in it: Hangman Page and the Dark Order versus Kenny Omega and the Elite. This is a feud, the Hangman Kenny feud from like just day one of them failing in the world title tournament, kind of coming together as a team unexpectedly while Hangman's trying to leave the Elite. He's trying to do his own thing, walk his own path, but him and Kenny kind of end up together. They win the tag team titles on Jericho's boat. Remember that Dynamite from the boat? That was so
Hmm.
fun. And Hangman's crowd surfing with a beer in his hand. And then it's just a feud that develops from day one. It builds into this whole thing where the Dark Order gets involved and Hangman starts, he finds a new group of friends, he finds a new family, and then he's got to go against his old ones, and it all peaking at that Full Gear show. And yeah, it really was the first homegrown star AEW fully rubber stamp made. There were great matches throughout the whole thing. There was a lot of heart, a lot of emotion, and it made Hangman Page into a bona fide star that AEW fans have an incredibly strong relationship with, an incredibly strong attachment to. And yeah, it's the most effective form of that angle AEW's ever done.
It's a great choice. I think it was really the establishing feud for the first like generation of the company.
Yeah,
I think we've moved kind of past that generation um, in that era of AEW, but
I
it definitely
agree.
is.
Yeah.
It is the story of the early stages of AEW, and I know um, it's been said many times like Hangman is kind of the main character of AEW in a lot of ways, and his
Yeah,
character is kind of constantly
I'll
evolving.
yeah. I'll say this one last thing. I agree that AEW's kind of moved past that generation and the Dark Order kind of feels like a group out of time, but it does say something about how effective this angle was when just a couple weeks ago on Dynamite, Hangman Page crosses the Dark Order in the back and you still hear the crowd react like, "Oh, like it still feels important even though the Dark Order is so far past being important at this stage of the game.
There is, I love that angle where like, uh,
The one
is
where
when
the casino where they're talking about the battle
yes,
royal?
yes, with
Yeah.
Evil, yes, you know exactly what I'm talking about just because it was, I thought it was funny. Like, but Evil Uno was like, actually, I just found out I'm gonna be in the battle royal. Like, I'm really excited. And then Hangman just comes up behind with the chair. I mean,
Yo,
look,
he this is what happened, Hangman, he's cutting his promo. Evil Uno comes up, he asks him if he's in the
oh
casino
yeah,
gauntlet. Evil Uno says, "Yeah," and then Evil Uno starts cutting a promo, and you see Hangman just turn around, grab a chair, and drill him in the back of the head.
Uno's just so clueless. He's just like, actually, hi, yes, Evil Uno's in the battle royal. It's
Oh,
so good. Yeah,
fantastic.
I mean, you could pick, I think, between um the Kenny Omega feud with Hangman, the Swerve Strickland feud with Hangman,
Yes.
and the John Moxley feud with Hangman. I mean, you could easily say those are the three best Hangman matches. Um,
Hangman feuds.
I mean, I'm sorry, those are the three best feuds in the
Yeah.
entire company.
Is Hangman I wanna ask if is Hangman, like we all know he's great, but is he, like, underrated while also being great? Like, is he like a Drew Brees where he's like, he never wins, like, an MVP, but people are like he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he never wins MVP.
I definitely think he's not in the conversation enough for like I don't think anyone ever says he's like one of the best wrestlers in the world. Um,
And they should because he is.
I mean, when has he bombed in a big spot since they put him in the
Right.
company?
Exactly.
He's peaked unbelievably high as a character, and as a wrestler. I mean, he's had some of the most amazing. I mean, he was the key figure in what I thought was the best match in the history of the company. And he's been in several others. Um, the feud I went with, and I had a lot of thoughts about this, which ones I could go on. I definitely considered all three of those Hangman feuds. Um, I went with CM Punk and MJF.
Yeah.
Um,
I had I went through mine. I don't have CM Punk in any of mine, and I felt really bad about that because CM Punk was such a valuable piece to this company when they had him.
yeah, the first run he had was tremendous, and I think, I mean, he did have a very good match with Drew McIntyre most recently at Hell in a Cell, so that kind of has salvaged things for him a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But to me, like the most worthwhile thing he's done by far since returning to pro wrestling was this match against um, or this feud
MJF.
against MJF.
Yeah.
I thought they laid it out perfectly. They had MJF beat the whole story of MJF, like manipulating Punk. Um, MJF did that angle where he talked about how he was bullied and how he loves CM Punk and that kind of stuff. People thought that was so good that people legitimately were like, I don't think they should have done this as an angle because I actually generally feel bad for MJF. And it was like people legitimately were saying that at the time suit, like, oh,
I
I
know
feel bad he was
exactly who
so
you're
bullied.
talking about.
And I was like, I mean, the whole point is that he's like a lying piece of shit, like, and he's trying to manipulate CM Punk's feelings. But he did such a good job in his promo that people legitimately felt that way, and they had that angle where I forget where it was. I almost think it was in Daly's place, but it might not have
The
been.
one where he got bloodied up with the chain?
Well, it's where CM. It's right after. I don't know. I can't remember if it was. I think it was the day after the promo, or the week after the promo, where he talked about being bullied, or it might have been the same segment. I can't remember, but
I
CM Punk,
do because there was the promo he cut, and then, like,
yeah.
at the end, they were on, like, the ramp together, and then the next week, they cut a promo as well, so that might be where the, like
Well, CM Punk comes out. He doesn't even cut a promo. He doesn't even have a mic in his hand. He comes out and you can hear him like audibly just go, "Is it true?"
Yeah, that was the same segment.
And MJF goes and he hugs him. And when he goes to hug him, you can like audibly hear several people in the audience go, Like, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was such a great angle.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, then, MJF turned on him, got all the heat, and they settled it with that epic dog collar match with the
Yeah.
CM Punk coming out to his old entrance music. And it was perfectly booked from start to finish. Perfect performers for the respective roles. Um, just really, really hit at a super high level.
Yeah, I was in the building when MJF returned after where he returned the first time to reset up the feud with Punk to set up the second stage of that feud.
Hmm.
That was the night of Brawl Out, so that never materialized or anything. But man, it's incredible that they did such good work that they had further to go, and it's a shame we're not gonna get it. Like, Punk in AEW is both a great run. Like, I'm happy we got it because it's a great run, and I'm mad that it ended the way it did because there was so much more for him to do. And
I mean,
now,
they just
he's gotta grab his Wingstop bag and pretend he cares about NXT
everyone. Oh, I think he does care about NXT, but
in certain aspects.
well, I think like what the whole thing with Punk and NXT is, I think that Punk like really, really wanted like to like mentor the next generation of wrestlers, and was obviously
Yeah.
really annoyed in AEW when like someone like Hangman Page, who was already a super successful pro, was like, "Man, I don't really want to deal with your stupid advice." As opposed to in NXT, he's dealing with all impressionable people with very limited ring experience that will gladly listen to any information that Punk has for them. So I feel like he's finding a much more rewarding audience for him to, play the role of grizzled veteran educating the youngsters or cosplaying as Terry Funk. Um,
Yeah.
than
I,
even
um, I was making a potentially slanderous joke, so
I
we can
I
move
know where you
on.
were going with this suit, but this is the gentleman's wrestling podcast. Uh, um, What do you think was the best promo?
Man, there was a good while at the start of AEW where it was a promo company with great matches. Like people would, stupid people would like, peddle the they don't tell stories, the people who we can stop listening to. But there was a point like early on in the company where it was a promo company that had great matches. You would cut great promos, you get the crowds fired up, and then you lead into these great matches. The one that I always go back to is the first one, John Moxley's debut promo. The one right after the angle at Double or Nothing. He's in the back. This went up on YouTube. This wasn't even on a TV show. This is right after he threw Kenny Omega off the stack of chips to end the pay per view. He's in the back. He walks into a locker room. First words out of his mouth: "One day they're gonna come to my funeral to make sure I'm dead, but that day's not today." And he cuts just, I think it only goes 2 minutes, but this just 2 minute declaration of war. And I watched it today and I still felt that feeling I felt when Double or Nothing ended of holy shit, this is new, this is different, this is a revolution in pro wrestling. It's happening in front of us, and this guy is the leader. And God, it still puts a lightning bolt down my back thinking about it. It's an incredible promo and it is an incredible mission statement. Day one, this is what we are. We're knocking the pillars of this industry on their ass. This is AEW. This is what you call a paradigm shift. God, love it. Love it.
My choice was somewhat it was John Moxley promo, but it was the John Moxley. Honestly, this is probably my favorite. This might be my favorite promo of all time. It's definitely my favorite promo involving two people.
Mm.
Um, it's John Moxley and Eddie Kingston going face to face before their I Quit match
Oh,
in 2020 at Full Gear.
phenomenal.
And Eddie was hadn't been in the company that long. He had kind of just appeared, after doing, he appeared during the Cody Open Challenge era of Cody with the TNT Championship, and he kind of basically talked his way into getting a job. And they were short on talent during that time period because of the pandemic, and the company was still getting off of the ground in terms of acquiring top talent and things like that. And Eddie had quickly emerged as one of the most popular wrestlers in the company, and he gets this title match against John Moxley. And him and Moxley have like what I feel like is probably the most realistic conversation I've ever seen in like a wrestling promo, in terms of how two people actually argue, which is a lot of interrupting each other, a lot of just trying to talk over one another, a lot of passion, a lot of, machismo. It felt so natural. It felt so real. They did the stipulation where like they can't touch, so or the match is off, and the both guys adhere to it, which was a really refreshing break from the trope of like, oh, they're gonna have a face to face, and then they're gonna do a pull apart brawl, and that'll be like the setup for the pay per view. It was so much more interesting. Yeah, it was so much more interesting that they couldn't do that. They had to sell it solely with their words and their emotions, and Moxley like telling Eddie, I was so happy for you, Eddie, when you got when you got this job, and Eddie's just interrupting him and just screaming at top of his lungs like, "Who cares? Who cares? You were happy for me." Like it's so good. And at the end of the promo, you know, because they're gonna have the I Quit match, and Eddie just goes like, "You're gonna have to kill me because I'm not gonna say I quit." And like you felt it, like that's who Eddie Kingston is. He feels real in a way that almost no other wrestler feels. And when he said, "You're gonna have to kill me," I'm like, oh my god, how are they gonna do a finish for this match? He's going to have to kill Eddie Kingston. Like he legitimately is. How are they even gonna come up with a finish that makes sense for Eddie Kingston to quit? Um, and I remember when it happened, like I watched it like a bunch of times that week. Um, it's probably it's one of my favorite promos ever by far, and I think the one that kind of immediately jumped out to me when I thought about the best promo in AEW history.
There was one more Mox promo that I wanted to bring up that I thought was really great. It's one that I think a lot of people forget, and I think it was setting something up that never came in the form that it came. But it was on the first dance episode where CM Punk debuted, the Rampage episode. Or was it the week before? It was close to CM Punk's debut. But Moxley's in the back and he's cutting a promo and he's like vaguely alluding to Punk in like talking about how, you know, we built this, this place was built on hard work and sweat and tears. And, if you're going to walk in, you better really, really want it. And it's just this promo that I think just slips a lot of people's minds, but it just sat in my head of like, man, he's talking about Punk right now. Oh man, they're gonna do Mox versus Punk, and it's like it didn't come in that form because this was pre Moxley going to rehab. I think he left out like soon after that. It would come later, but it was just this promo that just sticks in my mind of being like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I really want to see where that goes. So,
Yeah,
this just in, John Moxley's really good at talking.
yeah. Cage match has this Eddie Kingston promo against Claudio from Collision last year as a number one ranked promo in AEW history. I don't know if you remember that one. It was right before their match at a Grand Slam. Basically, Eddie going
Mhm.
through their history and stuff like that. Um, a promo I really like is uh I think it was a backstage exclusive, like a social media exclusive, but it's Daddy Magic after the Blood and Guts match.
Yes.
Um, where if you remember the finish to that match, Chris Jericho is like about to tap out, and they're on top of the cage. And Daddy Magic goes up there, and Claudio, I think, puts him in the giant swing or he puts him in the sharpshooter,
Yeah.
and you know Daddy Magic taps out, and then Daddy Magic's cutting this promo where of course he's covered in blood, and he's talking about how Chris Jericho got him this job. He is this great man. He's missed his kid's first steps. He's talking about watching his kid's first steps on video that he wasn't there for because he was here, helping Chris Jericho and how much Chris Jericho means to him, and that's why he would never let Chris Jericho be embarrassed by having to submit um,
Oh,
to Eddie
God.
Kingston.
So
It's so good. He says the line. He's like, you want to make big boy money, you got to do big boy shit. And
that's the exact line I was thinking
I
of.
legitimately think about that line all the time. Like when I'm at work and I don't want to do anything, and I'm like depressed or whatever. I'm just like, you know what? When you want to make big boy money, you got to make big boy shit. It is an amazing promo. I've watched it a bunch of times.
That
And if you
promo
haven't
made
seen it, I don't know what you're doing. If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
that promo made me want to see 2.0 get like a tag title run. Like
Daddy Magic's had
Daddy
some bangers.
He's so good. And him with like the pairing of him with Garcia, like those two, because all three of them came in together. But
Yeah,
the pairing of those,
I don't know if they like worked with each other beforehand.
like I
Um,
think they were kind of in like I think they were because Garcia did some like NXT jobs sort of, but I think they kind of just threw them together for a dynamite match. And then they all got signed, and it's like, man, this relationship with Daddy Magic and Daniel Garcia is like there's a lot of heart to it. There's a lot of like feeling there with that feud. Well, not that feud, but that like pairing because we've seen them literally since the first day they've come in the company. They've been paired together the entire way. They've never turned on each other. And it feels kind of like a Hangman Dark Order thing where it's like you've got this ascending star in Garcia, but you've also got this person that he cares about with Daddy Magic and Angelo Parker if he's ever around. But it's mostly Menard. Yeah, I just that pairing that's a really cool pairing to me.
yeah. Another category I wanted to pick out was most surprising star, and I mean this like who is the wrestler that really has broken out in AEW in a way you didn't expect. I don't think you would put like Will Ospreay on this list as an
Yeah.
answer for this or something like that. But the wrestler I chose for this was Orange Cassidy because I think people need to remember when Orange Cassidy was first signed by AEW, it was considered this kind of controversial decision because he was really just a gimmick on the indies, a popular gimmick, but just a gimmick on the indies. There was all these questions about whether or not this would work in a major league setting and kind of would he be able to get over and things like that. And I kind of knew his gimmick would get over, but I never knew he would become one of the most reliable, consistent wrestlers, not even in the company, but really in the entire world. Um, and he's been part of a bunch of feuds. He is uh, the definition of, I think, like a valuable upper mid card guy who's protected but loses enough to put other guys over. He has become a pivotal, probably one of the handful of most valuable people in the entire history of the company when you add it up. Um, and he came into the company really as just this meme wrestler from the indies. And the fact that he's turned into such a high quality major league professional is kind of stunning to me. And the fact that he's been able to maintain his popularity while really shedding a lot of like the gimmicks within his work, where he's able to have these really good matches, um, and retain his popularity while not, doing his gimmick all the time. Uh, has been super super impressive. It's been probably been the most effective gimmick work we've seen since the Undertaker.
3 words made tweaked Orange Cassidy's character enough and gave it the context needed for it to become a really effective television character. It was the promo before the Orange Cassidy Pack match at Revolution. And at the end of it, Chuck Taylor said, "This Sunday at Revolution, he's gonna try." And it was a funny line, but it also like put everything in context. Like, yeah, he's not really gonna try and like, some dopey,
Yeah,
dark match or whatever,
he
but
hasn't he hasn't put in any effort yet. And this time
because he
he's gonna try. I believe Trent said, "Well, he didn't say he's gonna try, but we think he's going to."
Yeah, and that was the little tweak he needed for everything Orange Cassidy does to make sense. It's like, oh, he just wasn't trying. And now he is, and now he's great. And he's become this super valuable, this super like tent pole star of the promotion. Like I think when you think of AEW and you think of AEW guys, you know, people who like define the promotion. Guys you think of are like Hangman Page, Darby Allin, and I think Orange Cassidy would be on that list. Kind of people
Mhm.
who just fully define what AEW means. And yeah, I wouldn't have thought that. To a much lesser extent, I think the stuff they did with Danhausen while he was there was really good and kind of tempering down the gimmick while doing enough of it for him to get over.
And the thing with Orange was like, it's a major tell when people criticize him, because I
Yeah.
know that's like a Cornette verse thing in terms of, oh, well, how can you take them seriously when they have Orange Cassidy on their television? It's like anytime someone has any criticism about AEW and they mention Orange Cassidy's name, they can just immediately be dismissed because
Mm.
he is the most consistent. He is so consistent. He's wrestled the most matches this year. I know that. He's probably wrestled close to the most matches in history. It's probably either him or Jack Perry, um, in the history of the company. He is unbelievably consistent. I think he's one of the best TV wrestlers of the last 10 years in terms of a guy that's consistently going out there and having above average matches on television week after week. Um,
And
there's nothing you can say that's a complaint. You can't complain about him and have me take you seriously as an analyst because he's been such a positive and again a surprise because of where he came in as just kind of this meme wrestler from the indies. Did a few spots that got over in front of 300 people.
and the thing about those particular like people disliking Orange is that he kind of took what they say, do less and slow it down, and he took it to a funny extreme and got over doing that. Like he took their advice and they don't even realize it.
Yeah, and he's like a really classic underdog babyface character.
Yeah, yeah. Orange was also mine, but I had a second pick that I can give,
Yeah, I think it's the
and
first
that
time we've had the same pick, which is pretty impressive.
I think no, we had the same TV match. Had the same.
Oh
We
yeah, we
both
did.
had
Yeah,
Danielson Omega.
yeah, you're right. Damn it.
Um, for my second pick, it's Christian Cage because who saw this coming? Like everybody knew Christian was good. He was also retired when AEW started. And then, he shows up at I think it's Revolution 2021 where he shows up and signs his contract and He's hyped as this Hall of Fame talent, and some
One of
people
Tony
are like,
Khan's favorite wrestlers of all time.
it's like, oh, that's for all this for Christian, huh?
Remember, people thought it was going to be The Rock.
But hey, look, Christian's come in, and you figure he'd be like a Matt Hardy type, where he's working, lower card stuff and kind of teaming with young guys, and that was his role to start with the Jurassic Express. But he has fully come out at age 50 whatever, and is one of the most consistently great acts on AEW television. He's having one of the best runs of his career, if not the best, because the only other ones would be the TNA run, which, depending on the booking, was, it was Christian doing his best. And then, like, that ECW run he had, like, at
Mhm.
the tail end of that brand.
Oh, I was tuning into Sci-Fi every week for
Me
that.
too, brother. Yeah. But, like, this is just his heel work has been so great, and his
He's used
work in
pretty,
the ring has been great too. Like,
yeah.
he's had a lot of really great matches on
I
TV
say,
as well with that TNT title run.
and he's been used like pretty conservatively in terms of like the feuds he's engaged in, how much he's on television, what he's actually doing. He's only doing stuff that's like really purposeful, and he's not overexposed. And he's everything he does is really clearly very thought out. Um, in what they want him to do and kind of how his what's his promo and his angle going to be. It's
Yeah.
really it's not like they've been rushing him into a bunch of matches or have him feud with a bunch of people. It's been very methodical, and there's been a lot of thought put into it on clearly on his end as well. So
Yeah.
he's a great
And
pick.
he's got that world title shot, and while I don't think he's going to end up using it, I talk about this in the Wrestle Dream preview, and you'll read about it. But if they put the world title on him, I wouldn't be super shocked. Like,
Tony loves him.
he's kind of earned a shot at on top. I don't know how long I'd run with him on top, but I think he's earned the shot.
Mhm. So to switch gears, actually no, we'll stay with this one because I think there's like there's a couple more categories I want to kind of get through here.
Yeah.
Um, the best signing, for me, my answer was pretty quickly was John Moxley.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of it for the reasons that you've detailed with some of his outstanding work with promos and the tone he has set for the promotion. And again, like that debut at Double or Nothing, him coming out, him laying out Kenny Omega, I think that was enormous in setting the tone of uh, this is a company where crazy stuff happens that's really important and feels big, and you've got to tune into our stuff to see this happen. And I mentioned this when we were talking about the Observer Hall of Fame ballot this year,
Yeah.
and both Cody Rhodes and John Moxley are on it. And Cody gets a lot of credit for historical significance in terms of him being one of the key figures behind the launch of AEW, which he absolutely was. Um, and Cody gets a lot of credit for that. But I think also John Moxley should get a ton of credit for that because John Moxley is ultimately, I think, contributed more to the founding of AEW than Cody has. And Moxley's debut at Double or Nothing is one of the three most important moments in AEW history in terms of just setting the tone of what this promotion was going to be like. And he was the perfect person, a former WWE wrestler in his prime, who many people had felt had been restricted by the way WWE used him, and here he is, and he's going to get to be himself. He's finally free. He's broken out of prison, literally. If you watch the video that he produced, and he is going to perform professional wrestling in a way that we have never seen on American television before. And I don't know, like there's been some really good signings for AEW, but it's hard for me to think of anyone that's been more important to this promotion than John Moxley.
I think I think of like a shift in the mindset of AEW fans is that at the start of AEW, it was a lot of people who didn't get an opportunity in WWE coming to AEW, and you knew they were going to get the chance. And I think 5 years on, I think that's kind of flipped where people sign with AEW and fans don't have that confidence of they're going to get a shot. And I think that kind of has caused some is a little bit of a part of the downturn of the company business wise. But that aside, I'll give my pick for best signing. Um, I wrote Swerve Strickland down, but then you brought up Eddie Kingston in best promo, and I realized, oh, I don't have Eddie Kingston written anywhere, so I picked him. Um, Eddie Eddie fits this company like a glove. He embodies like what's great about AEW because for so long Eddie Kingston was good on the indies. He was really good, but he just never got the chance because of, his look and his kind of his demeanor. I think he'd say he maybe messed up a shot or two or whatever, but now he's got the shot in AEW to be great and be, who he is, and he cuts his great promos and he gets over, and it's still that damn bomb not going off at Revolution in the barbed wire match still pisses me off because that was going to be like that was his Terry Funk moment and it got fucked up and it still annoys me. But he does everything with heart and passion and it's real and it's gritty and he brings the energy that I want out of AEW. Like that first Anarchy in the Arena match is one of the greatest like I've ever seen. And
Yeah, the
so much of it was
visual,
Eddie Kingston.
yeah,
Like,
visual of him with the gas can is like an iconic
yes.
image in the history of
He
AEW.
and there's so much of that feeling Eddie gives of just heart and passion and
He's flawed.
real energy. There's no like when I talk about WWE, I use the term it's super glossy and it's super, you know, phony and photogenic and there's none of that with Eddie. It's not
Mhm.
there's there's grit to him. There's realism and you feel it, like even up to last year with the Continental Classic and like his whole last year where he finally overcomes Claudio to win the ROH title. He gets to wrestle in Japan and he wins the New Japan Strong title. He puts both the titles on the line in the Continental Classic so he can be a triple crown champion like his heroes. And he starts off slow. Danielson holds the Eddie is a bum sign over his head after he beat him. And just, you know, he fights back and he fights back and he beats Danielson and he beats Mox and he gets to hold the belts. And then he finally gets Danielson's respect at the end of it at Revolution. And it's just Eddie Kingston like has become the heart and the grounding point of this company where things get goofy and wild and people set houses on fire, but Eddie's gonna be there to like get everybody's feet back on the ground and do just great work. And I'm so glad he's able to do it here.
Yeah, I feel like he's really representative in like how flawed he is as an individual and how much that relates to him as a wrestling character and
Yeah.
how if that helps him just feel like a real person is that like he can lose matches, he can come across like a huge asshole, he can basically be a heel for a little bit, but because he's so genuine, the fans are always going to love him and accept him in a certain way because of that.
He's a
Um,
very interesting pro wrestling character because he's chipped and he's flawed and he's got these problems, but he fights through them. He's not somebody whose idea is, "What if I never lose?" You know?
A riveting character idea. Um, so in that same note, um, so we talked about the best signing. How about the worst signing in the history of AEW? I think there's a very
Um,
obvious answer to this, but I'm interested to see if we align on this one.
for me, I went. This may be left field. This may be the name you have, but yeah, I'll keep mine short and sweet. For who? For what? Paige Van Zant. What was that for? Like, we burned months of TV. We killed Sammy Guevara as a babyface. All for what? For Paige Van Zant to have one match and go away again? Like, what was that for?
They needed to have their own Ronda Rousey. What do you mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, they eventually got her for one match, but
In Ring of
they got
Honor, yeah.
Ronda. Yeah,
Um, I totally forgot about her being in AEW. Never even
I
crossed my
don't
mind.
blame you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Who
up
did
there.
you have? Because I'll probably agree with you.
I had Jeff Hardy. Um,
Oh
I
yeah.
think
I mean, it's
so.
Jeff. You know it. It's
But
Jeff.
so here's what Jeff Hardy did for AEW.
Yeah.
He was presumably quite expensive.
Yeah.
Um, he was extremely bad and had some of the most embarrassing performances we've seen of anyone in AEW.
Mm,
And outside of the ring, he was a huge embarrassment and like a major problem of why were we employing this guy. Um, and I just think everything about
yeah.
it went poorly. Sounds like you want to do some Jeff Hardy defending suit.
I mean, I don't think he was the worst Hardy brother on TV. Like I think Matt was a bigger waste of time. Like Jeff was. It's Jeff. You know what's gonna happen. Like you'll get a couple months out of him.
Did they get a couple months out of him? I mean, they got a
I think
couple of
they.
matches out of him, but I mean,
Oh
he had that
yeah.
match against Darby which was really rough, and scary, and like not in a good way. And then they had that tag match against the Young Bucks on pay per view, which is like one of the greatest performances of the Young Bucks career. That they got that out of a passable level because he
Yes.
was just done, and he came with all this baggage before he even did anything, and then he came with more baggage when he started getting in trouble. Um, and was just a complete embarrassment to the company, and like again, presumably pretty expensive.
Yeah. I can't argue that too strongly. That was pretty bad. Mark Henry's probably up there too.
For value added, yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Yeah. I mean, he
Uh,
didn't. He
he
gave
crossed
us
my
a
mind.
Rampage catchphrase. Is that worth seven figures?
You think he got seven
Um,
figures?
probably.
Nah, I
He
don't
ain't
know.
coming
Not,
cheap. He got six.
I mean, if we
I'd
believe
bet.
those, oh yeah, but that's a huge difference between 6 and 7.
That's true.
7 is presumably 10 times as much as 6. Um,
Yeah.
anyway, kind of a similar category, but I kind of want it's a slightly different, and because I think this has to do more with expectations. Is biggest bust in AEW. Um, I said Mina Shirakawa. Just kidding. That was a joke. Um,
Oh, you got me with that one.
yeah, isn't that a
I
good one?
was like, whoa, hold on.
Um, I'll let you go first because mine might come in a little hot.
I was like reacting like, oh wow, he like doesn't like Mina's stuff.
Hates
And
Mina
then
Shirakawa.
as you were talking, I was like, oh wait, I get the joke now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Harley Cameron might have something to say about that.
Yeah.
Never mind. All right, so I have two answers. The first is a question: does CM Punk count? Like, cause you,
Uh,
you,
I
he
don't
was
think he.
great. He was.
Yeah,
Let me make that clear. He was great. He was great. The ending being as bad as it was. does that like count him as like a bust? Because you came
I
out
think he's a.
ahead, but then you
I think
ended
he's
up
a. I understand what you're saying. I think he's a flame out, not a bust.
okay.
Because I
Because
don't
I
think
don't.
he
Yeah,
flamed out, but he like you got a lot of your money's worth with CM Punk.
you did, and
He moved business greatly for you.
he did, and he was great when he was there.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was just
until
thinking more
until
like
the end.
long term, like kind of.
Oh yeah.
But so if not, my second answer was Wardlow. Uh, he was he was really hot. The MJF feud was great, and then he after that, it's like I don't know, man. Like I started wavering on him in that first TNT title run where it's like, hmm, is this guy great at anything? Like he looks great. He's a 10 in a look, but he's not really a great talker. He's not really a great wrestler. Like he's kind of just a six across the board. And he was working with Powerhouse Hobbs. He was working with Samoa Joe, who we know can still be really good. He kind of just, simmered out, and then they put him on the bench. They brought him back with the Undisputed Kingdom. They gave it another try, and it didn't work. And now he's hurt. So it's like, and I think he's older than a lot of people realize. Because I think people think like, oh, he can develop into something, but he's like he's 36. So it's like, is there much development there, or is he what he is? So I don't know. People they'll get on Tony for kind of like dropping the ball with Wardlow, and I've kind of just been like, man, is there much of a ball there to be dropped? Like, I don't
He's a
know.
guy. He's a guy that was utilized like perfectly for his first year or two in the company for what
Yeah.
his skill set was. And he was in this feud with MJF, which had been built up for well over a year. And they did the whole thing, and he finally got his revenge. And that was like the perfect use of Wardlow. He was interacting with a really, really talented performer in MJF. That role had been solidified for well over a year. And there's no way to really follow that up with anything that would come across feeling the same way.
And before we move on, I do want to give a little some props to Sean Spears for his role in that feud.
Mhm.
I'll dump on Sean Spears all day, but I will give him credit where he was due. He played his role in this feud perfectly
Yeah.
as like the mini boss.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great feud. There's
Yeah.
no denying that. And but once that was done, how do you follow it up with a guy who like you said is kind of limited. He's not super charismatic. He's not a great promo. He's not really a compelling wrestler in the ring. I don't think fans ever wanted to see Wardlow struggle unless it was for a very specific reason, like the MJF feud. So people weren't really invested in any Wardlow match that wasn't him just power bombing people.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot there for him to sell as a sympathetic babyface, or be interesting as a controlling heel. It just never clicked. So, and I think they gave him opportunities, and I don't think he delivered. And I think you had other guys coming into the company, um, who could excel in that role if given the opportunity.
Yeah,
Um,
like I always say when it comes to Wardlow, like that MJF match was Double or Nothing 2022. So, in order to push Wardlow, you kind of got to dial back with some guys. Who are you swapping out with Wardlow? MJF? No. John Moxley? No. CM Punk? No. Kenny Omega? Well, Kenny was out.
yeah,
Um,
Hangman. Yeah,
Hangman? No. Like, So you're going down the list of people, and it's like, man,
Well,
like, what's there for Wardlow to do,
and
really?
because the MJF match was an angle was done so well, people were getting out of control with their expectations for him. Like, Wardlow's just going to be the world champion one day. It's like he's probably not. Like,
Not in this company. Like,
no. Look who the
and that's
world
a credit to
champions
the
have been.
booking. That's
Yeah,
a credit to the booking that they got him so over.
look who the world champions have been. Like Samoa Joe is their worst world champion. Samoa Joe's 3 times as talented as Wardlow.
As we saw in their feud, yeah. So it's like, man, it's tough. I do like there's a role for Wardlow on your wrestling show. I have said for a little while that I would test him out as a hot tag guy. You put him in a tag team with like a small baby face who can talk, and you put them together and you let him be the hot tag. For lack of a better term, he needs an Enzo Amore, but they don't seem to be doing that, and he's kind of just, a guy who got over for a little while.
My biggest bust right now is Mercedes Monet.
Hmm.
I think it's time. I think it's time for
Think it's
us to.
time.
She debuted in the company in March.
Yeah, it's been about six
It's been
months. She
a,
had her first
it's
match in May.
it's been a while, and she came in at a pretty big price tag. She hasn't helped business at all.
Yeah, that's
So that's out the window. We could talk about, oh, she helped move SmackDown ratings a couple, years ago and was actually one of the biggest draws in WWE. She has not helped up AEW really at all from a business perspective.
yeah.
And
You
she was
can't.
brought in to do that. She also hasn't been good in the ring either. She's been okay at best. And I think
Yeah.
her performances have been really awkward as a
Well,
character, and she hasn't had like a signature feud. I think the closest she's had is her stuff with Willow, which was good, but I think a lot of that has to do with Willow. I just
I
don't
think
see it,
yeah.
Mercedes. I haven't. I've been trying to be patient with her. I'm really like a neutral on her. When she was coming, I was at Big Business. I was at her debut. It's a nice debut. She's really over in the building and all that kind of stuff like that. But she hasn't done shit worth mentioning in AEW. And she
Yeah.
came in with so much fanfare. She came in with like they tried to kind of like recreate CM Punk's debut with Mercedes Monet.
Yeah, and to
And
that level, she's nowhere near it.
no,
She's
it's not even close. What's the most notable thing she's done since she came back? Not counting her like return itself.
probably the Willow match. I mean, he wasn't good in the Vakira match. The Brit match was nothing. It was a 2.5 star match. What else? Like the
Like
second, like the Emi Sakura match might be like the number two thing she's done in the
and
company
it's
so
yeah, we're
far.
getting it 6 months here. So she's had time. So could she turn it around? Yeah, but I almost feel like the women's division is starting to pass her by. Who
Well, I
would you
mean, it's
push?
tough. It's tough
Who
to
would
say that with Mariah May having
I
the
know
women's title and her
Mariah hasn't done well either.
slipping a little bit.
I know. I think the entire at this point I'm like convinced like the entire division should be built around Willow.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that at
She's
all.
your most consistent performer in the ring. I mean, she's as consistent as anyone in the ring. I think she's your most consistent like promo and just getting over in the buildings. And I think it's time to stop messing around with her. I know you're paying these other people a lot of money. But here's your fresh, organic, natural babyface star. The other company has nothing like her. Um, I just to me like Mercedes right now is a huge bust, and hopefully she can turn things around. I'd love to see it. I do think that she has brought maybe a level of consistency to the women's division in terms of the attention it's getting, which has been a positive. So I
Yeah.
will say that. but she's got to hold up her end of the bargain in terms of her performance. It just hasn't been there in the ring and out of it. And it certainly hasn't been there from a business perspective.
Well, how about this? Let me ask you this: bigger bust, Mercedes or Okada? Which is a
Oh, Mercedes.
wild question.
No, Okada's still secretly great. Like he just hasn't had as many like opportunities to be great. Like I'm not worried about Okada at all. I know people talk about him being lazy. I thought he was fine in that Bryan Danielson match. The finish was bad, but
Well, yeah,
uh,
the problem is he's been in the Elite feud, which I called one of the
yeah,
worst feuds in the
I
history of the company.
I'm not worried about Okada at all.
Yeah,
I'm pretty like he's fine.
I
You know,
am too.
could he be
I
doing more? Yeah, but he's Okada. Like I feel like he's delivered in big singles matches when he's needed to. Like
do you remember that Kenny Omega angle? Um, it was a match. It was the first match in like the title tournament where it was supposed to be him and Joey Janela, but instead it was Sonny Kiss. And he has this new big entrance with the cheerleaders and the brooms and the pyro, and
yeah,
then he beat Sonny Kiss in like 30 seconds,
yeah. I believe we had a whole little social media controversy after that, right? Like
as we always do with AEW.
yeah.
But I think Okada's the same way. You could fix this guy in 3 minutes.
I think I don't think there's anything like
Well, not
could
fix
he
him,
be
but you can
doing
kind of like
yeah, well like
make
could
him
you be doing more with it?
credible.
Like could you be doing more with him? Yes. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with him. Like I think people still see him as a big star.
Yeah, kind of like make him more like you could reset the spotlight on him whenever you wanted.
Yeah, I mean he's basically never lost a match yet, so
He's only lost to one person, and that's Brian Danielson.
yeah. So I'm not that I'm not worried about him. Um who is the person you thought would be in AEW but never has been?
This was a tough question for me because AEW's had a lot of guys,
A lot of a lot of the
a
answers are
lot
they
of
eventually have
people.
ended up there.
You know, the New Japan names all pretty much ended up over there.
Mhm.
You know, any Lucha people, they've a lot of the CMLL side have been over there. So this was a tough one. I feel like this is a kind of chalk answer if there is one to this question. I said either Kevin Steen or Sami Zayn,
I said
but
Kevin Owens.
yeah, that that could be changing in a little bit, maybe, possibly, who knows?
Yeah,
But yeah,
I had kind of resigned myself for him being like WWE for life, but you know, his contract situation the way it is, if he does make the jump, I mean, I think he's capable of incredible work. I think he's one of the more
I have
I
said he. You go ahead.
I
I'll.
was just gonna say, I think he's like one of the most talented wrestlers of his generation. I think he's an incredible promo. I think he can come across as super authentic, and I think in a setting where he's allowed to have way more creative freedom, and because he's a good promo in WWE where he has to use all the WWE isms. You take those handcuffs off him, he's gonna run wild if he's motivated. Um, like in a lot of these feuds write themselves. Kevin Owens versus Eddie Kingston, Kevin Owens versus John Moxley, Kevin Owens versus Kenny Omega, Kevin Owens versus Brian Danielson, Kevin Owens versus Will Ospreay. Just throw them all in.
Kevin
It's gonna
Owens
be
versus
great.
Swerve Strickland,
Yeah,
which
versus
is one of my.
Hangman.
Yeah. Like, I think Kevin Steen has John Moxley level upside if
Yeah.
he were to sign with AEW.
Hmm.
That's how much I think he could bring to the table.
Yeah.
And Sami Zayn, like it's starting to annoy me how he is getting historically like whitewashed in this turnaround of the bloodline feud. Like this whole thing started with him. This whole thing got hot because of him. And it's like he's getting kind of just forgotten about. And I want to see him come to AEW and kind of like do that there and be like, oh no, it was Sammy that got that hot.
Yeah. They're both guys that spiritually fit AEW with their backgrounds in Ring of Honor and their relationships with a lot of the people that are in the company. I think
Yeah,
AJ Styles is another one, but AJ, to me, AJ already lived out and explored a non WWE world, and now he's just happy to get his big WWE paycheck, and I don't begrudge him for that.
yeah, and it like surprised he hasn't been in AEW. I don't know if I'm surprised if AJ's never jumped because AJ's always been like a company guy.
Yeah, he
He was
certainly
always a
has been.
TNA company guy. You know, he's a flag bearer for whoever's team he's on.
And they like and
So
like they like him. Like Vince obviously liked him. The Levesque regime likes him too. Like they're willing to give him a lot of money. And frankly, he doesn't have to work as hard in WWE as he would have in AEW in terms of like needing to stand out. I'd love to
yeah,
see him in AEW. I think he has shown this year with his matches against Cody and his match against Marufuji um, that he can still wrestle at a high level if he needs to. Um,
yeah, he's still AJ. It's yeah, he could. I could he have like a Copeland run minus the leg break? Oh, that's a guy we haven't talked about, Adam Copeland. He was a pretty good signing. He outkicked his coverage, I think, but yeah, back to AJ. I think there's still some gas in the tank for him.
hey, if they're gonna sign a veteran from WWE, I want it to be a veteran that's willing to jump off a cage and break his leg.
That's true.
I was gonna say Jeff Jarrett for most surprising star, just as someone who's worked out way better than I expected.
I mean, he didn't surprise me. I don't know what you guys are on. It's Double J. Whenever he, I think it was Garrett Kidney who said it on "You've Got to Be Kidding Me," but when he's not a world champion and he's not booking himself, Jeff Jarrett's pretty great.
um, we're gonna wrap things up here. Who do you? So this is AEW MVP. Just who has been the most valuable performer in the company over these 5 years? Um, I think we might have the same answer on this one, but I'm interested in seeing who did you say it was.
Well, my answer is John Moxley.
That is my answer as well.
Yeah, he was the first defector. He's the leader of the charge. When the when things get off track, he's the one who rights the ship. He's the guy who embodies the feeling of AEW from day one throughout whatever problems this company has, through the growth, through the downturn. He's there to be the big reset button. Like whenever things go wrong, it's like, all right, where's Mox? And
Give me the ball, as we said.
yeah, that's if that's not an MVP, I don't know who is.
Yeah, I agree. There's been some really valuable players in AEW, but I do think Moxley, 2 Wrestler of the Year awards in the Observer. Um, I think you could make a case for Jericho. I think in the first
Yeah,
year or two of the promotion, Jericho has a case. And then subsequently, you could say like CM Punk. You could make a case that Moxley has never been like the singular most important person in the company.
yeah, Hangman. We talked about all the
Yeah,
feuds he had, and there's Kenny Omega as well, who
yeah. Kenny,
had like,
has missed a lot of time.
but
Same.
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of like what's like Danielson. You could make a case like when Danielson's been there, he's been as valuable, but he also wasn't there for the start of the company and it's also missed time due to injury.
Hmm.
Um, I would say MJF, would definitely be in the mix in terms of just a singular character that's been there over the course of the entire company. But
I
I
wish there
for all
was
the
something positive I could give to MJF. Like because he's really good. It's just his instincts are kind of
he
iffy, and
he's been
he was in a really
responsible.
bad angle.
I mean, he's been responsible for some of the best stuff in AEW.
Yeah, you talked about it with Punk with the Punk feud. Okay, so we did
Mhm.
talk positively about him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a controversial character. He's become very divisive, especially in the kind of circles we're in, where there's concern about him like leading the company astray with sports entertainment angles and stuff like that. But um, he has been a hugely valuable figure. I mean, he's an incredibly talented performer. Sometimes
Yeah.
his instincts aren't always perfect, but he has been responsible for a bunch of great stuff. So I definitely think he deserves recognition. And kind of the last award we had was I said, who do you think will be AEW's MVP over the next 5 years? And I did not pick MJF, but I think MJF would be probably one of the two or three favorites for this award. I ended up choosing Will Ospreay. Um, but I'm curious to see who did you have for that award?
Will Ospreay is a great pick. I'm stunned that I forgot him. To be honest, I did. I did say he was in the best match in the promotion's history, so I didn't completely blank him off. But I actually wrote Daniel Garcia. I feel like he has got that Moxley energy of give me the ball and I'm gonna run with it. I think he has. We saw with that MJF match at All Out, he's got the talent to have high level matches in that company. I thought that match with MJF was phenomenal. He
Mm-hmm.
has the crowd connection that he's built over the 3 years he's been here. I feel like he just has that dog in him to like climb to the top of the company if they give him the opportunity to. And really, if whatever shot they give him, I think he has that ability to make it work, and he has the talent to deliver in the ring to make it. I can kind of see like a Bret Hart trajectory for him, where he's this hardworking mid carder who builds himself up and builds up the cachet with the fans and built and has this catalog of matches to where they give him the ball and he can run with it.
I love that comparison, like a Bret Hart, like because Bret Hart was in WWF for like right about 10 years before he was world champion.
Yeah, he was on WrestleMania 2, and then he has his crowning moment at WrestleMania 8, at WrestleMania 10, excuse me.
Yeah. So and I like that because I think with Garcia, it does have to be a little like I don't know if like delicate is the right word, but it has to be like really precise in terms of taking this guy um who came into the company with like really no fanfare, was
Yeah,
an indie wrestler that not that many people would have known.
he was
Um
full bottom of the card, like the bottomest of the bottom of the card.
yeah. And they have been slowly bringing him up there. And I don't think he's a guy you can rocket strap, but if you have a long running story for him, which and it seems like they are really starting to explore that um with his MJF feud, he could be, a generational rival for MJF. Um
And they do like him enough to give him like big opportunities. He had that feud with Danielson, you know, a couple years ago at this point, where they had went back and forth with the three matches. He's wrestled Mox, he's wrestled like a lot of the big names in the company.
and he's a very good promo. And I think he has an authenticity and a seriousness to him that is resembling of the John Moxley.
Yeah.
Um, he's a very different wrestler than John Moxley. He's a much more classical wrestler than Moxley, but and he's not as big as Moxley physically, but I do think he kind of has a similar kind of tough aura and seriousness about him.
Yeah, like
That is
I don't disagree with your pick of Osprey at all. Osprey is
Osprey's kind of an easy
going.
pick in terms of he's the best wrestler in the
Yeah,
world. He's pretty much already, one of the two or three most important wrestlers in the company right now.
yeah.
And they and
It's Osprey. It's an
and
easy button.
and the thing with Will is I think they wisely did not like immediately just put the title on him. They are, he's super prominently featured, but they're gonna make his eventual world title win really mean something and feel important. That's the sense
They
that I
might
get.
they might use that to sell the Wembley show in
Yeah.
2026.
And
Which
I think that bodes well as opposed to we put the title on him and then what? Which I think
right.
sometimes happens when you want to push someone super hard.
But the
I think
problem is Osprey, like he's so great at everything. Like it still shocks me how great of a talker he's become. And
he's way better at American television wrestling than people expected him to be.
yeah, and he's
Okada
so
is too.
great
I
at
know,
everything.
I know, I know.
Okay.
People don't want to hear me say this, but like Okada is too.
Yeah, Okada's
Okada was a natural American on American TV. Too much so for a lot of
yeah.
people, but he
But
is.
Osprey is just so phenomenal at everything that I see him do a big angle or I see him have a great match. I think, God, get the belt on this guy. Let's go. Come on. But I do get the draw it out, kind of deal there. But yeah, your Osprey pick is great. I think Garcia is going to be a guy who really becomes that next AEW homegrown kind of guy. Like he's gonna be with your Hangman and your Darby and your Orange Cassidy. He's going to be on that level over the duration of this next contract that he's just recently signed.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about AEW going into the future, you got to look at who's carrying the torches right now. So you have Danielson as your world champion, who's basically going to be done as a full time wrestler when he loses his title, which could be this weekend. Um, you've got Moxley, who is not like a super old guy, but has been around for a while. Um,
He's got 5 years of exposure in this company.
yeah, I would still say like he's still in his prime from a career
Yeah,
perspective, but he's been around for a while. You got Christian walking around with this briefcase. Um, you've got Kenny, who I don't know when Kenny comes back, like how much he's going to have left in the tank. I
I'm
expect him to come back.
expecting soon.
Yeah, I expect him to come back at full strength for the most part. Like I expect him to. He looks like Kenny Omega. I know. I saw like a picture of him in Kota Ibushi. He looks. He doesn't look frail. Um,
Yeah.
Kenny does. Kenny doesn't. Kota Ibushi. Maybe not so much, but um,
Uh,
um, but like you are going to be leaning on, I think, this generation of wrestlers in their early 30s, late 20s, more and more over the next 2 or 3 years because these guys are going to age out. Um, and who you're going to replace him, it is going to be, I think MJF is a constant because he's,
yeah.
obviously age wise is still in his prime. Hangman Page, same thing. Swerve, same thing. Um,
Osprey.
but then it's gonna be Osprey, and it's gonna be wrestlers like Daniel Garcia, and it might be someone we aren't even thinking about right now.
Darby Allen. How often have we said his name on this show? And he's been a
Mhm.
great constant for AEW
Yeah,
throughout the
I think
whole time.
yeah, like I would say, like
He might be next up.
Orange Cassidy and Darby are very similar to me in terms of how
Yeah.
like valuable they've been as consistent television performers, really consistently over, always baby faces. Darby had a huge hand in making the Sting stuff as successful um, as it was. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I feel like I've always been the high man on this guy. Um, and I feel like I'm kind of getting into the position where I'm kind of constantly defending him. But I think Jack Perry's been great. Like, I thought Jurassic Express was a successful team. I thought they had a really good run with the tag championships. And I think his heel run has worked out way better than expected. I can't believe playing a CM Punk footage worked. I like this whole gimmick with the scapegoat and the truck and the TNT championship and all this stuff. Like, I think he's doing a great job. I think we're seeing him. He's been very slowly brought along from the very beginning when he did not have a lot of experience into becoming a more and more full-fledged character in this company. And I think he can work. Um, I think he has hit his every benchmark they have put in front of him. And I would not rule him out from being in this mix in terms of the next generation of guys because he's still under 30 years old. He's still very young.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree with Perry there. I agree with you on Perry there. I don't think like he's not at his final form. His final form is like they're gonna try and make him the top babyface. I think the scapegoat deal is helping him because he's a much better talker than he was. He is
he
like,
he's closer to where like Daniel Garcia is than he in age wise he is too than he is to Will Osprey,
yeah,
who Will Osprey is the best wrestler in the world and has been for a couple of years.
yeah. I
And he's
think
kind of
Perry.
walked into AEW, you know, not really having to prove that much because I mean he'd already been
Yeah,
a pseudo member of the AEW roster before he officially became one anyway. So
yeah. I think Perry, he's working on his heel stuff now, and I don't think I'd turn him anytime soon. But his final form is going to be babyface, like trying to make him a top guy, and I do think he's going to be much better served in that role, and his peak is a lot higher in that role. So I wouldn't write off Jack Perry at all. And then you've got Sammy Guevara, who yeah,
yeah, I think they realized that Sammy might have a ceiling the way he's been currently used.
yeah. I mean, the turning back and forth doesn't really help. They've,
Look,
I
here's what
think the whip's
happens.
kind of burned out on
You
Sammy.
you tap these guys as the four pillars. It's kind of a mistake.
Well, three
Um,
of them are going to be really good.
well, you have one that races ahead of all of them,
Yeah,
and then you have you have another guy. They're basically all at kind of I think like four different levels in a lot of ways. But the issue is they're always going to be compared to one another, and when you have someone like MJF who's raced ahead of all of them, in terms of development, in terms of prestige within the company, it becomes really difficult for those other guys because they're always have this title hanging over them of being part of the four pillars. And the fact of the matter is, over the course of the history of the company, a lot more people are going to get signed, a lot more talent is going to come along. Um, and if you're looking at a booking perspective, it's like who is more likely to be a future big star in this company? Is it going to be Sammy Guevara or Daniel Garcia? Like everyone would choose Daniel Garcia, or even like more demonstratively, like Sammy Guevara or Will Ospreay, Sammy Guevara or
yeah,
Konosuke Takeshita, Sammy Guevara or Kyle Fletcher. Okay, it's not going to be Sammy Guevara. And I like Sammy. I think he worked his ass off in this company. I think he's given 110% with everything he's been asked to do, but he's not going to be a top guy. It's just not going to happen.
yeah. His ceiling just isn't there, and that happens. He plays to his ceiling, and I think he's very good in those roles.
I'm going to wrap it up. Do you have, Sue, do you have anything you want to plug that we haven't gotten to yet?
Um, no, we got voicesofwrestling.com. I got a lot of work on there. You'll see me, a couple times a month previewing WWE, reviewing WWE, talking about other shows whenever I watch them. I'm on the New Japan beat pretty often. F4W online, I review Collision every week. None this week because there is no Collision. But every collision I'm on there. And then my personal blog, Williams Watches Wrestling, where I do some personal projects. I do some fan request matches and review a lot of that stuff. My current project is Williams Watches WrestleMania. I'm working through all the WrestleManias. I have the most recent one that went up is WrestleMania 10, at least when we're recording this. I'm planning on doing a show every Wednesday, and you can find that at williams.wordpress.com to find extra reviews if you like my thoughts on things and you want to see me talk about other wrestling that I don't really get a chance to talk about.
All right. I want to thank Suit for joining the show. I want to thank all of my listeners. I want to thank everyone who's left a positive review for us on your various podcasting apps. I'm told that's very, very important. But I'm happy to see that 5-star rating on Spotify every time I look at it. So thanks a lot to everyone, and I'll talk to everyone again after a while. Bye bye.